Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is Saturday, September 16th, 2023, and I'm going to need you guys' help at the end of this video. I think I'm going to put up one of those surveys about which section of church history or which doctrine or which idea I should publish next, just because I've had like three or four ideas, and I've made like 2 or 3 videos this week and then just deleted them just because I was all over the place, just because I've been studying so much this week. But I basically managed to compile about 1,000 years of church history in about 30 pages. And I'm pretty happy with the final product. I just got finished going through it. This is going to be the chapter in my rightly dividing book that I'm entitling The Politics of Christendom. Because basically the rise of Christendom kind of ends with Augustine. Let's see. And then Augustine is really, you really get Christendom when you start mandating that everybody gets their kids baptized, their infants baptized. That's when it's just like, that's when Christendom becomes a thing, because that's when the idea of you being, the idea of baptism being like circumcision started with Cyril of Carthage, which is going to be about 75 years before Augustine. And he's going to advance the idea of infant baptism because he wanted to basically attack the Novatianists, who are attacking the fact that he fled the persecution and he shouldn't be the bishop anymore. So he is basically trying to establish himself by advancing the power of the Roman Catholic priesthood, which in turn is going to advance his own power. And Augustine's going to see how the game is played, and he's going to do the exact same thing with Pelagius, and he's going to get infant baptism, which sprang from Cyril's ideas and became customary in Cyril's day, to becoming mandatory in his day. And once it becomes mandatory, it's just like you're born in the empire, you are a Christian. If you were a pagan, you were pretty much like the dregs of society. You would be like, the people in the ghetto where you don't want to go into that neighborhood. Essentially, those are the no good people. Anybody who was middle to upper class was a Christian, and typically the heresies, the quote unquote heresies, would usually incorporate the lower classes into their mix, because the lower classes just they never liked Christianity, which is why most of them are going to turn to Islam when Islam gets going, because Christians have these violent mobs. They're constantly changing the rules. They're constantly changing the doctrine. Literally every generation. You're not just changing a doctrine. You're coining some new shibboleth against all the infidels who don't believe it the right way now. And in the Arians, or in the days of Arius, it was the homoousia. And then it's going to go on from there. And in the days of Cyril, it's going to be about how the one true church can baptize you, and that baptism is legitimate even if the person denies Christ. So the lapsarian, we admit the lapse, okay? And then they hate the Novatians, because the Novatians actually think people who deny Christ should have some examination and wonder if they're ever really born again. This crazy idea that people who deny Christ under persecution might not be born again. And then they're going to go from there, and the next one is going to be Augustine, and it's going to be all about original sin. And Augustine does do away with free will. He just keeps it in name. But he pretty much teaches a theology that does away with free will, practically speaking. And Luther is going to capitalize on that over 1,000 years later. It's going to be like 1,200 years later. Luther's going to pop up and say, or 1,100 years later, and say free will exists in name only. Now, he is not getting that from Scripture. He is an Augustinian monk. He is thoroughly trained in Augustine's writings, and he is just interpreting Augustine's writings with consistency. And when I get into my chapter on the Reformation, I am going to shred Martin Luther, because the myth of Martin Luther being this guy who just was so just beat up over his sins, and he just read Galatians and it just opened his eyes, and all of a sudden he started preaching justification by faith, is just an outright lie. Luther's first writing was a 500-page treatise on Romans, which he just reads Augustine into Romans, okay? He is not preaching justification by faith. He doesn't even understand justification, because in the Catholic world, justification and salvation, once you started having baptismal regeneration, became one word. Justification, salvation was one word. They merged the two terms together because they're trying to teach baptismal regeneration. And so the washing of regeneration and the renewing of the Holy Spirit was baptism now to them. And so the idea of being justified by faith and then that afterwards saved by the renewing of the Holy Spirit because you confess never entered into their equation, because they've been baptizing babies for 1,000 years. And Luther was all for infant baptism, and Calvin was all for infant baptism, because their hero, Augustine, was the one who made infant baptism mandatory. So how can an Augustinian monk, where all of his followers are Augustinian fans, turn on infant baptism? The answer is he can't. He has to promote infant baptism, and that's where regeneration preceding faith comes from. Your Calvinists will never tell you this because they're liars. They're not ignorant. They know what Augustine said. They know what Luther said. They are not ignorant. If they've gone to a seminary and they're Calvinist or Reformed or Lutheran, they know, but they're just lying to you. Okay? So Luther is going to use his politics, because he was originally going to school to be a lawyer before lightning struck him in the butt and he decided to be a monk. But he is going to ride the politics of the day, and Wycliffe and Huss for 100 years had gotten the idea spread that this indulgences thing is just evil. Like, they're literally buying, you can literally, I want to commit adultery on my wife. Well, buy an indulgence ahead of time. In other words, buy your atonement before you sin. Think about that. I'm going to give you, here's a lamb. Why? Because I'm about to go kill someone. No. It don't work like that, cuz. Like, no. Atonement's for sins committed in ignorance. You can't be like, here's my lamb, I'm about to go kill someone. Here's my lamb, I want to hit that, and I'm married. Like, you can't do that, dude. But the Catholics were selling that. It was really bad. And from the days of John Wycliffe and John Huss, who are coming off of the bubonic plague, and basically the Christendom armies getting crushed by the Ottomans and going, you know, these popes really suck. The easiest thing for them to attack was indulgences. The hardest thing for them to attack was the Eucharist being the literal body and blood of Christ, because they're all super superstitious, and they still are by the American era, which is why they're burning and drowning witches. Okay, so they can't really bump transubstantiation, and they don't really get that done until Zwingli and the pre-Calvinists, and then. But they can't touch infant baptism with a 10-foot pole, and they murdered the Anabaptists for touching it. Because the masses are converted on the basis of fear and superstition. Most of the masses are not genuine converts to Christ. These people were praying to their pagan idols and stuff like that before they became Christians. And that's why in the South, when Islam took over, they became Muslims. They don't know. They're idiots. They don't know. And they're not being taught. And they're not being taught to read. They're certainly not being taught to read Latin. And the only Bibles are in Latin. They don't know. These people are covered with crap and farming all day. Like, that's all they know. They know growing vegetables and building walls. And some of the really smart ones become Freemasons and join Gnostic cults. You know, but nobody is really, really educated. Nobody is educated in logic. That's going to start to come afterwards with the Reformation. Or I'm sorry, not even with the Reformation, with the Renaissance. That's going to bring logic back into the equation. But you're going to have a long road to get from people being super idolatrous, superstitious, to being just the level of logical they are right now, but nobody's figured out rhetoric yet, which is why they keep falling for stupid ideas. Okay? Nobody's figured out rhetoric. Nobody has stopped and read what the ancient Greek philosophers wrote about rhetoric, and they nailed down all the BS artistry out there and said, this is rhetoric. And all the church fathers were trained in rhetoric because it's the art of persuasion. It's not the art of being logically right. It's the art of being linguistically persuasive. And those are two totally different stories, which is why the logicians didn't like the rhetoricians. One was based on truth. The other one's based on winning. Okay? Remember, logic is godly, rhetoric is satanic. So anyways, I'm going to get into, Luther and the jacked up Calvinists in my next chapter. That's going to be the Reformation as discontent. But I want to walk you guys through this chapter, and then I'm going to leave a poll probably after that to ask you guys what to teach on next. Because I'm looking at the feast. This Messiah 2030 thing is really getting under my skin because I know they're blocking my comments. It looks like these people are Messianic Jews who are running this, or possibly at Seventh-day Adventists. Even though Seventh-day Adventists have been historically historicists rather than futurists, so it looks like it's probably a Messianic Jewish group that's doing it, but they're not being open about who they are. They're monetizing the crap out of it, and they are basically, I'm seeing that they're predicting that the resurrection is going to happen in 2030. I just read a comment today by whoever owns the channel saying that we say, let's actually look at this comment. So they just finally released their free version. They're claiming that they're putting this out there for sale because they need the money for the distribution of the thing, even though the distribution's free. You just pop a video on YouTube like everybody else. You don't need to sell a gig stick with that on this because anybody can download a YouTube video. If you don't want to pay for YouTube and use the download section on your YouTube, just download a bootleg app, which will allow you to download the YouTube video or get a free recording app like I have right here. This OBS Studio is totally free, and then you can just record the YouTube video and keep it. He doesn't need to make any money off of this. He's just trying to make money. And here's what these guys are saying now. See, this is the channel here, right? Now, you see who these guys' influences are, okay? Remember, I'm not a fan of Joel Richardson. I've told you why. Looking forward to the video, I listened to Messianic Rabbi Monte Judah and Messianic theologian Joel Richardson. So apparently, people think Joel Richardson is a Messianic theologian now. So he's apparently getting absorbed into that camp because of FAI Studios and because their work in Israel. None of these guys are Messianic, but they're looking at them because they have this, Jews can do no wrong stance on their ideas because they actually, FAI Studios is actually operating out of Israel. Joel Richardson's Islamic Antichrist theory is shilling. That's all it is. It's shilling. And he says, week calendar when he will be coming, the biblical Yom Teruah celebration. Jesus will not come back. Jesus will come back about the middle of September, Tishrei. I don't know. Jesus says you don't know the times of the season, so how do you know he's going to come back in the middle of September? Maybe he will. Maybe he'll come back at the Feast of Trumpets. I don't know. That's likely, but there's nothing that says he has to. He's going to come back when the Antichrist sits in the temple and claims that he's God. He's going to come back on that day. That's what the Bible says. That's what Luke 17 says. That's what 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 says. That's what Matthew 24 says. That's what Revelation 11 says. Okay? You read 11 through 13 is all synonymous. Revelation 11:13 is all through synonymous. Okay, that's what it says. Anyways, he says, okay, blah, blah, blah. The Jews did this. They moved this, blah, blah, blah. And he says, correct. This month shall be for you the beginning of months. Rosh Hashanah shall be the first. Okay. So this is what this guy is saying. Make no mistake that these guys are predicting the rapture in 2030, okay? This premieres on the 16th. He says, if you are suggesting that the first resurrection rapture will occur soon, please recall Messiah 2030, the prophetic messianic timeline, part 1, and part 2. We place the first resurrection in 2030 according to 52 prophecies that mandate it. These guys are liars. Okay, and I'm going to do a whole series on this, so I want you guys to vote on what's next. These guys are absolute liars. They're going to take a lot of true prophecies that are related to the 2,000 years between Christ's first and second coming and the 7,000-year history timeline, which is all typological. These are all typological prophecies. Which that means is if you get my Revelation book, I talk about different types of prophecies, okay? And I talk about timeline prophecies, and I talk about different kinds of prophecies that are indirect prophecies. In other words, it's a foreshadowing of something. But none of them are an express word from the Lord that says, blah, 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 this is going to happen in this much time. Okay? The closest you're going to get to that is going to be Hosea 6, where he says, after 2 days he will revive us and we will live in his sight. And if you apply Moses' day as 1,000 years to Hosea 6, then you get from that 2,000 years from Christ's death and resurrection and returning to heaven. He will return back to earth and revive and regenerate the Jews. In other words, bring them back to life. Okay? So these guys are saying 52 prophecies mandate that the first resurrection happens in 2030. That is a lie. These guys, like nobody I've ever seen in church history, and I mean, I have been reading a ton of church history and a ton of theology. I grab everything I can find that talks about the timelines, that talks about basically interpretations of the book of Daniel and interpretations of the book of Revelation and interpretations on the second coming, because I'm a nut for this stuff and have been for years. And nobody in history has ever done what these guys are doing. What these guys are doing are claiming that there are 4,000 years from Adam's birth, or from Adam's creation, to Christ's death and resurrection. No timeline on planet Earth has ever come up with that. Zero. Absolutely zero. Just like nobody came up with the Islamic Antichrist theory before Joel Richardson, nobody has ever come up with this, okay? Now, you had 1,400 years of Islam existing, and nobody came up with an Islamic Antichrist theory, even though John of Damascus, who was the first person to comment on Islam, called it the spirit of Antichrist. Okay, why is it the spirit of Antichrist? Because it denies the Father and Son. It's that simple. It's the spirit of Antichrist because it denies the Father and the Son. And that's the central theme of Islam, is denying that God can possibly have a son. That is a central doctrine, okay? So it's the spirit of Antichrist on that basis. But the idea of the actual Antichrist coming from Islam, even though they thought it was the spirit of Antichrist way back then, nobody ever put forward that theory. I mean, ever. Despite the fact that Islam was gobbling up the whole empire. Nobody thought that because there's nothing in Scripture to make them think that. Okay, Joel Richardson's going to come up with this really bad theory, and next thing you know, you have a bunch of people believing in an Islamic Antichrist, and they're believing, because of the pre-wrathers, that when the sun turns to darkness and the moon turns to blood and the whole earth shakes, that's the end of Armageddon, which I predict could happen around 2030. And so all this stuff is coalescing to one single lie, in which these people are claiming that 2030 is when you can expect the resurrection or you can expect Christ to come. Well, I've talked about this in my criticisms of the pre-wrath theory. When the sun turns to darkness and the moon turns to blood, you're going to see shooting stars, because it says the stars will fall from heaven. And that is going to be sold to you that the rapture already happened. In the aftermath of that, they're going to sell to you that the rapture already happened. And they're probably going to be demonic apparitions claiming to be raptured saints at that point. You probably will have this. Remember, you're going to have false prophets and false Christ popping up all over the world to deceive the world into following the Antichrist. I have already heard last year 4 different Christian people claiming to have seen dead loved ones show up as ghosts, see them and talk to them. Okay? So it's already happening. I've had it preached from a charismatic pulpit that your God's going to send angels in the form of your dead loved ones to give you messages. Okay? So this is already spreading. The devil's already at work with us. So when you have this great earthquake and the earth going topsy-turvy, which is in Isaiah 24, this is Revelation 6. And this ushers in the beginning of Daniel's 70th week, but these guys are telling you it's the end, okay? And all of this is lining up to right here, 2029, 2030, in that era, okay? So these guys, now the best calculation I've ever found is Bishop Ussher's 4,000 years between Adam and the birth of Christ. This guy just out of thin air, and if you read, there's a if you go look up, just Google Messiah 2030, you can find a study that somebody wrote back in the day, like in the early 2000s, called Messiah 2030, and he writes a book about it. And this guy is making the same claim. And if you read his study, his paper that this guy made in seminary, he's just arbitrarily adding years here and there to make it work. He's adding years to, I forget, I think it's like between Abraham being called and Abraham going, and he's just saying, I'm going to add this many years here. And he's adding years between Adam being created and Adam sinning, just arbitrarily, just out of thin air, to make his theory work. That's what I believe these guys are basing their dates on. This guy's, because again, his book and his dissertation were called Messiah 2030. I think that's what this is based on. And I don't know who these Messianic Jews are, but a lot of the stuff that they're pulling together sounds exactly like my book. I don't know if these guys would have ever seen my book. It's in the Bible. All the stuff is in the Bible, so I don't doubt that somebody else could figure this stuff out. But there's a ton of stuff in there that's true. And what is wrong is where they change the dates arbitrarily to make 4,000 years work between Adam and the death and resurrection of Christ. Then they put Christ's death and resurrection at 2030, which is not accurate. It's 2033. Jesus was probably just starting his ministry at 2030, because we absolutely know that John the Baptist started ministering in 2029. Or in the year 29. That's when John the Baptist started preaching. So how did they get Jesus' death and resurrection a year later? Simple. Michael Rood's stupid one-year Jesus ministry theory. That's how. These guys are Messianic Jews. Michael Rood teaches a stupid false theory that there is only 1 year in Jesus' ministry. And Irenaeus calls that out in the 2nd century and says there's a Gnostic group running around saying Jesus only ministered for 1 year. And I forget who is the first Christian author to say that, but it's like hundreds of years later, somebody's deceived into thinking, oh, it might be Clement of Alexandria. Michael Rood points that out, okay? Clement's a horrible scholar when it comes to timelines, but they literally take the word where he says the year of the Lord's favor and say, there, Jesus must have only ministered 1 year. Well, Irenaeus is already pointing out that this lie is going around 20 years before Clement writes it down. And this whole idea is based on a false assertion that there's only 2 Passovers in the Bible, and that's not true, because John is going to very clearly record 3, and if you know that the first second literally means it's literally the Feast of Weeks, and the first Passover is going to be the start of the feast, or not the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Unleavened Bread that starts the New Year. The first Passover, or the first Sabbath, is going to be the Passover and the beginning of the feast, and then the first Sabbath is going to be the end of it. And so they're going to call it the second first, and that's going to be in Luke when he talks about when the Jews are heading back from Israel and picking the grain, and they're calling them out for picking grain instead of resting on the Sabbath, because they're walking back from Jerusalem to Galilee after the feast of unleavened bread is over. They spend that whole week in Jerusalem, and then they're walking back, and you're going to have those Sabbaths, which are going to be on different days of the week, and then you're going to have the Saturday Sabbath, which is probably going to be a couple days later, like in Jesus' death and resurrection. So those guys are walking through a field on the Sabbath on their way back to Galilee, because it takes several days to make the journey. So these guys are going to take Michael Rood's stupid false prophecy, which he's going to pull a Bible copy out of the Middle Ages, like the year 1000 AD, that is missing that second Passover, and he's going to claim that all of the other Bibles were forged, and he's got the one legitimate copy, even though it's 1,000 years removed from the originals, and it's the only one he can find. He is going to write in his stupid Michael Rood book. My ex-girlfriend had a copy of it. Took me 3 pages to debunk it as totally false, that dozens of church fathers wrote that Jesus only ministered for 1 year, and the answer is false. One wrote it. And if you just follow his own link to his own reference, the only one of those church fathers that's even going to be mentioned in his own reference is Clement, because he's the only one who got that stupid idea wrong. And remember, Clement was a Gnostic, and he got a lot of stupid stuff wrong. Okay? So anyways, these guys are then going to say, well, there you go, 2,000 years from Christ's death and resurrection. It's in 2030. Bullcrap, bullcrap, bullcrap. They're going to make it nice, clean lines between Christ's death and resurrection and Adam by arbitrarily adding time between Adam's creation and Adam's sin and stuff like that. And then they're just going to land on this nice, crisp date, which happens to align with the anniversary, the 2000th anniversary of Christ's ministry, which I think could begin the ministry of Antichrist, or the unfolding and conquest of Antichrist. We'll see what happens, but the point is there's no way the Messiah can come back in 2030. Do you know how I know? Think about where we would be right now if he was. And just keep counting, okay? Because these guys aren't holding to a mid-trib position. They're not holding into the temple needs to be built and all this stuff, okay? But the people who are believing this stuff are basically post-trib. The Joel Richardson crowd is coming out as post-trib. The pre-wrath camp is really post-trib. The way they just see it is it has to be, because they try to cram the 7 trumpets and bowls at the end, it has to be 5 months before the end. But that's basically post-trib. It's a 7-year period, and you're in the last half of the last year. So that's when they think the rapture is going to occur. Okay, so these guys are going to look at everything that's going on with the pandemics and wars, and World War III is going to break out and all this stuff, and they're going to be building you up towards the idea that Christ is going to be here when the Antichrist shows up. Don't fall for this crap. So that's another thing I'm doing. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the Nestorian controversy, because there's a document called the Bazaar of Heraclides, which Nestorius apparently wrote under a pseudonym because his writings were all being burned, and he writes his doctrine of the Trinity in there and Christology in there. And they have looked at this now, because this has been recently published in all different languages, and they know it's Nestorius who wrote it now. And Nestorius has been exonerated. Nestorius was never a heretic. There was never anything that he taught. You got to remember, the guys who condemned him became the Monophysites, and then they were condemned in turn in the next council. And the whole reason they condemned Nestorius had nothing to do with his Christology. It had to do with the fact that he didn't want to call Mary the Mother of God. That's what he was pushing back against. And once Mary is called the Mother of God, they immediately start going into creating statues of Mary and worshiping those statues. And then they start putting emasculated images of Jesus on the wall, and they start worshiping those. All of this is going around at the same time that Epiphanes of Salamis and Jerome is writing his Latin Vulgate for the first time. And it's around this time that, it's like 20 years earlier than this, then Augustine is finishing all his writings on predestination, on infant baptism being mandatory. So all this is happening in like a single generation. And when, by the time you get Jerome actually publishing his Latin Vulgate, which straightens out the 1800 years of additional genealogical time added to the Septuagint, he is going to do a commentary on Daniel. But he's not going to figure out that he has straightened out the errors in the timeline. He's not going to publish on that. And in the same time, Augustine's going to write his City of God, where he really is promoting amillennialism and the idea of this invisible advancing church kingdom, which can morph and change and adulterate itself and prostitute itself to any government that's in power, not just the Roman government. Okay? Because when they first started unifying with the Roman government, they started seeing the Roman government as Christendom. And Rome's going to conquer the world, and the church is going to conquer the world with Rome. The woman's going to ride the beast all the way to world conquest. That's how they looked at it. And then Rome got sacked, and Constantinople couldn't help them. And that's when Augustine started writing his City of God, and he started promoting the idea of, like, the church is this invisible, it's all mystical, it's all allegorical. And immediately after that, the Latin popes started prostituting themselves with the Franks, because they realized we can't ride that beast, so we need a new beast to ride, because we are definitely a harlot, so we need a new beast to ride. And what's going to happen first is going to be Clovis. Clovis is all the Franks are Arians. And so you're going to have two factions in Rome, okay? You're going to have one faction that says, let's stick with Byzantium. They're going to make a comeback. They're just having a rough time right now, but they're going to make a comeback. Rome will reemerge, okay? This is going to be the old Latin aristocracy that's still tied to Byzantium. There was a Roman Senate for a while. The Goths, the Ostrogoths, are going to sack Rome, and then the Ostrogoths are going to settle down in the east over like Greece and Italy, and then the Visigoths are going to settle down in the west over Spain. The Vandals are going to sack Carthage in North Africa, and the Vandals are going to take North Africa, and that's another Germanic tribe. They're all Aryans. And then the Lombards are going to come through, another Germanic Aryan tribe, and they're going to sack Italy. I don't know if they sack it from the Goths. I didn't dig into that history that much. But then you have the Franks, who are going to be up in the corner between France and England. They're going to be up in that corner. And they're still pagan. They're still pagan. And they're very much a warrior clan. And the Franks are going to show up. And this guy, Clovis, is going to marry his wife, who is Clotilde, who is probably just means wife of Clovis. So that's probably not a real name. But Clotilde is a Catholic. So he marries a Catholic woman on purpose. And here's why. All of his enemies are Arians. And if he marries a Catholic woman, these local Catholics are going to be directed by their bishops to aid him. Oh, your guys are hurt in battle? We'll come help them. Oh, here's some food, here's some bandages, here's some... It's basically a walking supply chain that goes with you wherever you go, where you want to fight. The church is going to donate to you because you're conquering their Arian rivals, because the woman rides the beast, okay? And so Clovis has a Catholic wife, but he definitely does not want to convert to Catholicism. He gives his sister away to Theodoric the Great of the Ostrogoths, so he's allied with the Ostrogoths, who are basically the main power in Eastern Europe, and now he's becoming the main power in Western Europe. And so you have those two, and you have the Lombards pretty much controlling Italy, and you have the Ostrogoths controlling Spain. And what he's going to do is he's going to defeat all of his rivals in France, which is going to be mostly the Alaman and other smaller Germanic tribes, and then he is going to basically control all of what used to be Gaul, which is now France. And during this period, he is going to lose a battle to the Alaman. Okay, this is what, just so you know, the Alaman, if you're Spanish, they're going to call Germans the Alemanni, because that was the tribe that was closest to Spain, okay, outside of the Franks. What's going to happen then is he's going to lose this battle. He doesn't want to be a Catholic, and the reason is because his Catholic wife baptized two of his sons against his will, and the first one died after she baptized him, and the second one got sick and almost died after she baptized him. And he's a pagan, and he's superstitious, and he's like, we ain't touching this Catholic thing. That's bad juju, okay? But then he loses the battle to the Alaman, and in the whole time, he's got an Arian court now, because his sister's married to the Visigoths, who are Arians, and his wife's a Catholic. She's pretty much the only Catholic in his court, okay? And she keeps pushing him, and he says, okay, fine. If I win this battle against the Alaman, I will worship the Christian God, which in his mind is the Catholic God. The Arians are Christians, but he's listening to his wife, okay? And this is how Christianity would spread among these kings. These superstitious women would be basically controlled by these false teacher bishops who would, worm their way into the home of weak-willed women, always learning, never coming to the knowledge of the truth. And they would fill their minds with their superstitious bullcrap, and the women would be all scared, and they would baptize their babies and do all this stuff because they're afraid, because they're being manipulated by these snakes in the priesthood, okay? And then the women would whisper in the ears of their husbands, just like Eve did to Adam, and get them to do the stupid things that God doesn't want them to do. And so he says, okay, let's be superstitious. I mean, if Constantine slapped a cross on his shield and won a victory against his rivals, and the ancient Israelites took the ark out into battle and never once ended up getting the ark taken by the Philistines because they tried to use it as a magic token, I am going to say, if I win this battle, I'll worship your God. Like countless people have said, including me, if you get me out of this court case or get me out of this jail cell, I will worship you, Lord. Never turns into genuine worship. Trust me. I did that. I did that before, years before I got saved. I know tons of people who have. It never turns into genuine, long-lasting worship. God, get me this thing I want, and then I'll worship you. No, it never works, okay? And this is what this guy does. He wins his battle, and so he becomes the first Catholic Frank, okay? So Clovis has got it pretty good. He's got the assistance of the Franks now. They don't like the Arians. The Lombards are running stuff, and but Clovis is the first Frankish Catholic king, and they are going to support him. And then the local Roman population is going to support the Franks now. They're going to start to merge with them. And then eventually the Vikings are going to invade them, and that merger of Franks, Romans, and Vikings is going to become the Normans. And the Normans are going to invade England and Italy and all kinds of stuff, okay? But in this early era, he is going to become a Catholic. And then after Theodoric the Great, who's married to his sister, dies, he is going to defeat his son in battle and basically keep the Ostrogoths out of Italy. And so now the Lombards are controlling Italy by themselves, okay? And his goal is to take over Italy from the Lombards, but he's got competition now with Byzantium, who's going to try to take it back. And Byzantium had been basically hiring the Ostrogoths, because they've been hiring the Goths for years to help them fight the Huns and stuff like that, and help them fight out other Germanic tribes. And they basically hired the Goths, Theodoric the Goth, to oust the Vandals out of North Africa, because they want to take Carthage back. And they succeed in doing that. And then Clovis defeats Theodoric's son, and then they're like, well, now is our chance to reinvade Italy and take back Italy for the glory of reestablishing Rome. And they invade Italy, but they're not successful because the Franks are also invading Italy, and now the Aleman are basically they're overlords over the Aleman, and the Aleman are now fighting with them. And so these two are coming down. Let's look at this. And so the Franks in the Aleman are going to come down to take the lower half of Italy. The Ostrogoths are pretty much going to dissolve after this, because the Byzantines are going to come up and start to attack the Ostrogoths over here and take lower Italy and Sicily and Corsica back. Okay? Or maybe not, whatever, Sardinia, Corsica, whatever this island is. And the Byzantines are going to take that back, and they're basically going to split Italy. Okay? But for a while, it's going to be the Lombards are still there, because the Franks are fighting the Visigoths down here, and they're expanding the Frankish kingdom down to here. And the Ostrogoths are actually, you have the Vandals down here, and at this time the Muslims are starting to rise up and come across here. And Clovis's house is going to rule England. This is the Merovingian dynasty. So the Merovingian dynasty, just so you know, in the 1700s is going to come up with the Rosicrucian cult. And I'm going to tell you why they come up with the Rosicrucian cult. Because they were betrayed by the Roman Catholic popes, and they should have been the rightful heirs of the Holy Roman Empire. But they were betrayed by the Roman Catholic popes. And here's how that went down. So Clovis is going to rule, and his sons are going to rule for about 200 years. And they have a system of rule in which they basically have lords underneath them. So this is where your medieval system of basically kings and lords kind of comes from. It's going to be modified somewhat with Charlemagne, but it's basically a German system, okay? And so they would establish these different ruling lords, and then he's going to have this mayor of the palace, which is Charles Martel, in his household. So think of them like the stewards of Gondor, okay? So the House of Stewards and then the House of the Kings, right? So that's how he is. He's called the mayor of the palace, okay? And like the steward of Gondor, he's going to be like, Gondor is mine. And he is going to marshal the king's armies, while the king's just a figurehead at this point. He's basically conquered the kingdom. He's given it to his sons as heirs. They've become figureheads. And basically the mayor of the palace, which is pretty much their prime minister, is basically running stuff. And this is going to be something that commonly happens. Now, you're going to either have a prime minister who understands that the king is always going to be the next person to get his head chopped off if things go sour, and the prime minister's house, or the house, the mayoral house can rule forever and just keep replacing the king if he wants to, if he just decides never to take the power. Martel understands that. His son Pepin the Short, who's Pepin the Stupid, does not understand that. And so Pepin, after his dad Charles Martel wins the Battle of Tours against the Muslims, stops their advance into France, and gets all the favor of the Catholics. Mind you, the Merovingians have pretty much defeated all of the Arians, with the exception of the Lombards, okay, which are controlling Italy. And the popes want the Lombards out. They don't want any more Arians interfering with their papal elections, and they want the one true Catholic Church to rule everything. One ring to rule them all, and in the darkness bind them, okay? And so they're going to kind of have a wink, wink, nudge, nudge deal with the House of Martel, and Pepin the Short is going to write the Pope a letter and say, who do you think, I'm just asking your opinion as the voice of God, who do you think should rule the Franks? The person who is actually controlling the Frankish government, or the figurehead king? And the Pope at that time, I forget his name, but he is going to be like, picking up what you're laying down, bro. I think the one who is actually in power should have the crown. And he is going to basically give consent to the House of Martel, Pepin the Short, to overthrow the first ever Catholic popes. The first ever Catholic Germans. Okay? The Germans that defeated all the Aryan tribes for them, the Germans that basically saved the Roman Catholic Church from extinction and being overrun by Aryans. He's going to betray his house. And he's going to put Charles Martel's son as king. He's going to anoint him as king. And Pepin the Short is in turn going to give Rome as a fiefdom, Rome and its surrounding territories as a fiefdom to the popes. And that's where you're going to get your papal states from. Okay? So he's just now given the popes their own dominion, their own secular dominion. They're going to have their own armies after this. They're going to have basically a complete dictatorial police state where they are pretty much a pharaoh. They're a god king. They're the voice of God. They're the high priest. They're the king. They're everything in the papal states. And that is going to be what's the basis for the Vatican state now. Well, Pepin the Short is going to he's going to basically contest, and he's going to fight, and he's going to end up being back all the other Franks and being sole ruler with the Pope's support. And then his son Charlemagne is going to continue to expand his kingdom. And you're always going to have rivalries, you're going to have all kinds of Game of Thrones crap going on, but at the end of his life, Charlemagne has expanded the Frankish Empire to what you see here in this map. So all of this is Charlemagne's expansion, okay? The Lombards are out. The Byzantines control this because they're not attacking the Byzantines yet, okay? They're friendly. They're all Nicene Christians. They're not going to attack them. They're really just trying to get rid of the Arian Goths, and the Byzantines are now thoroughly Nicene, okay? And so the Byzantines control this, and then Charlemagne controls this, and the popes have an idea. We need to get absolute power over the entire church. And it just so happens that the guy who is doing this pope, has been a contested election. This contested election, they really elect him really fast because they don't want interference from the Franks in this election. And they elect this pope, but the family of the previous pope, because they're all nominal, awful people, they hate this guy because they wanted another member of their family to be the pope. You have powerful families in Italy that are fighting over who gets to be the pope constantly, okay? It's all about money and power. And this guy is going to be accused of adultery and perjury. These people are going to beat the crap out of him and try to claw his eyes out. And he's going to get away, and he's going to escape to Charlemagne, who knows he's a legit pope. And then Charlemagne is going to make him swear that he didn't do any of this stuff, and then just exile his enemies outright. Boom. And 2 days later, it's Christmas. And this is the year 800. And Charlemagne is going to just show up. And they, when he comes into church and he kneels down to pray at church, like every good Catholic does, the Pope puts a crown on his head and proclaims him Emperor of the Romans. This pisses off the Byzantines, because the Byzantines are like, what are you talking about, bro? We're the Roman emperors, dude. Like, you can't just make another Roman emperor, Pope. Matter of fact, up until this time, not long before this, the popes needed to get the blessing of the emperor to be pope. And the reason is because you still had the Roman senatorial families pretty much ruling there, and they were all loyal to the emperor because they think Constantinople is going to liberate them one day from the Goths. Remember, they've just recently tried. Okay? So they're counting on Byzantium to one day retake Italy, and these Italian families of Roman descent are very much invested, and then you have this pro-Byzantine party, and then you have the pro-Gothic party, which is they're Arians, so we don't like that party. And you have contention between these people over who gets to be the Pope all the time. And now all of a sudden, these guys have roped in these Catholic Franks and basically said, within one generation, we'll make you kings and overthrow the Catholic Merovingian dynasty, and then we'll make you emperors if you make us undisputed heads of the church. That's the deal. Now, they're not saying that outright yet, but that's the deal. This is going to be the basic deal that is going to run until after the bubonic plague. So you're going to have like from 1800 to around to around 1400. Okay? From 800 to around 1400. So 600 years. This is going to be the deal. The deal is between the French and the popes. And when you get into everything from the Crusades to the Avignon kidnap papacy, they call it the Babylonian captivity of the church, and everything that's going to lead into the Reformation is going to center around this unholy alliance between the popes and the Franks. We'll make you kings and emperors if you make us vicars of Christ and heads of the church. That's the deal. And of course, the Byzantine patriarch, who considers himself right up there with the Roman Pope because everyone else has been taken over by Muslims now, does not like this. And the Roman Emperor, the legit Roman Emperor, does not like this either. Now, never mind that this patriarch has a false apostolic pedigree, which they made up, going back to Andrew. Okay? They were the seat of political power. And they looked at it and they said Rome is number one because Rome was their original, even though it's not their seat of government, it's their original government, it's their original city. It's the original city-state that started the whole empire. And so they made the Roman Patriarchate number one on that basis. Not on the basis of Peter and Paul, not on the basis of Peter being the first bishop, not on the basis of Jesus handing the keys to Peter, but on the basis of the Roman popes or the Roman bishops being at the seat of the original Roman government. This is a church state. They understand this is the state religion and the emperors are in charge of it. Okay, it is closer to what is Anglicanism than it was to what they wanted to pretend it is, which is Christ's one true church having conquered Rome. They did not conquer it. They never had a unified ever. They never had a unified church in the Roman Empire. Anyone who is telling you that is lying to you. They never had a span of 20 years without some schism and some breakaway sect and then another drama. There's literally dozens and dozens of synods condemning this guy, condemning that guy, Oh, three guys fighting over who's the Pope again for the fourth time in 100 years. Like, it's non-stop drama. It's non-stop schisms. It's non-stop people trying to rope in the emperor, and the emperor's going this way and that way. Now they're an iconoclast, now they're not. Now they're an Arian, now they're a Nicene. They're just going to do this over and over and over again. It's non-stop drama. There's never a unified church. There's never such a thing as Christendom, unless you count this right here. Because this is a true alliance. The Frankish kings are nothing without the popes, and the popes are nothing without the Frankish kings, and they both know it. And this unholy alliance is going to continue for 600 years. Okay? So what's going to happen after this is that Constantine's house is long gone. Okay, it's long gone, and they keep basically getting these new generals that are claiming the Pope's seat, okay, or claiming the emperor's seat. And these generals are basically going to pop up, and this one's going to be a Syrian, this one's going to be an Armenian, because they're basically just Roman legions, and Roman legions would pull from wherever they conquered and have mixed peoples, and then who'd ever rise in the ranks, you'd end up having, now we've got a Greek Roman emperor, now we've got an Arab Roman emperor, now we've got a an Armenian Roman emperor, now we've got a Syrian Roman emperor. There's probably some loose blood tied to the original Roman aristocracy in these all the time, because they're marrying the right people. But this is a mongrel like dynasty going forward, okay? But they're going to keep using names like Constantine again and again and again, and Theodosius again and again and again, okay? So Leo is another one. It's going to come again and again. They're on Leo the Fifth or something like that by the time they're in the iconoclast era. And so they're going to declare war on the Frankish kingdom, because he's claiming to be emperor of the Romans, and he's emperor of the Romans. So they're going to declare war on them. And the Franks are just going to be like, okay, we're just going to go in here and take southern Italy. What are you going to do about that? And they don't like that, but they can't really do anything about that. They do launch one naval assault on them, but they can't really do anything about that, because the Franks have hired the Slavs, I think these are the Bulgarians. The Bulgarians are Hunnic people. They're descendants of the Huns. So the Hungarians and the Bulgarians are descendants of the Huns. Remember that, okay? And they're going to blockade Constantinople from all the land trade that they could do across the Black Sea and stuff like that. And so Constantinople is diminished in their economic capacity. They're getting fights and battles and stuff with the Arabs over here, and they're winning some, losing some, but in short, they don't have the power to project and retake Italy. And so they agree to call Charlemagne the emperor, but not the emperor of the Romans, in exchange for getting Venice back, because Venice is going to be their main access point into Italy, and the Venetian merchants are going to be a big deal throughout the Crusades and into the Renaissance, okay? The Venetian merchants are basically... Where is Venice? So they're right here. And they are basically the front point access into the Frankish kingdom. So they're going to be the front point access into the Frankish kingdom right up here. And they're also going to have Latin colonies essentially right in Constantinople. And so you're going to have Venetian merchants in Constantinople. Well, this isn't going to go so well. And we'll get to that in a little bit, because they're going to actually slaughter these people later. Okay? So they're going to basically have a truce. Now we're going to have the Frankish Emperor Charlemagne, and we're going to have the Roman Emperor in Constantinople. Okay? He's the emperor, but not the emperor of the Romans. Then what is your empire called? Well, it's just called the Frankish Kingdom, but we're going to call it the Empire. Okay, if you want to, that's fine. And this is the wrong map. By the time you get to the Crusades, we're going to have the iconoclast problem. Okay, well, why do we have an iconoclast problem? Simple. Because iconoclasm is literally anti-idol worship. and the Caesars, the legit Caesars of Byzantium are going to be like, we need to stop with this idol worship thing. Why? The Muslims are anti-idol worship, and they smash idols wherever they see them, and they're kicking our butts all over the former Byzantine Empire. They've pretty much taken half of it, okay? In this whole time, you're going to have basically the Roman Catholics, through Charlemagne and his descendants, conquer and force Roman Catholicism on some people, and then they're going to send missionaries to other people. So the guy who goes and, what is his name? There's a monk who's going to go to Jutland, which is Denmark now, and he is going to start to evangelize the Scandinavians. Charlemagne is going to actually force people like, I don't know if it's the Bulgarians. I think they're Orthodox, but he's going to force different tribes like the Czechs. So the Czechoslovakians, okay? The Czechs are going to become Catholic because he's going to just force them to become Catholic. Basically, the rule is I'm going to take over your kingdom. If you want to stay in charge, you're becoming Catholic now. And they're basically, the Romans are liking this, and they're sicking the Franks on whoever they want to take over stuff. They're going to keep fighting over this little island down here. I think this is Sicily. And the Muslims are going to take it. Then the Byzantines are going to take it, and the Catholics are going to take it. It's just going to keep going back and forth. Okay. The Franks are going to keep fighting with the Muslims down here in Spain because the Muslims basically got pushed back to this kingdom called Al Ansara or Cordoba, and they're going to basically hold this for a while. And the Franks are going to keep pushing Catholicism northward from there. It's been in England for a while, but they're just going to keep pushing it and advancing it all throughout the Celts. Until pretty much England's all Catholic. And then the Byzantines are going to send Saint Cyril and his brother. I think his brother's name is Methodius. And they're going to come up with the Cyrillic alphabet, which, if you remember in my previous video, this other guy's going to come up with, I think his name is Umber or whatever. He's going to come up with the Gothic alphabet, and that's how the Goths all turn Aryan. Well, they realize it's like, shoot, if you give these guys an alphabet and have them reading essentially in Greek, and the educated ones are going to be able to roll over to read the Greek Bible pretty soon, and they're going to be Orthodox. So what they do is they get the Cyrillic alphabet out there, and the Cyrillic alphabet starts spreading to all the Slavs, including the Kievan Rus, okay, which are going to be the predecessors to the Russians. And they're going to have a kingdom here for a while, starting in Ukraine, and it's going to be in Belarus, and eventually it's going to be pushed up to Muscovy, okay? Well, the people of Meshech, that's the Muscovites, are a distinct people from the people of the Rus, but they're going to marry together, okay? The Rus are going to be descended from Riphath, which is one of Gomer's sons, and the Muscovites are going to be descended from Meshech, which is one of Japheth's sons. So Gomer and Meshech are brothers. So the Muscovites would actually be like the uncle to the Russians, which these used to be called the Riphean Mountains after Riphath, okay? And somehow they become Rus, and that's why you have Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal in some translations of the Bible for the Ezekiel 38 invasion, okay? And so you're going to have basically the Muscovites up here merged with the Kievan Rus, and that's how you're going to get the beginnings of what is later going to become the Russian Empire. But right now, they're basically just a mixture of Slavic people that are a mixture of Orthodox and pagans. That's all they are. And Constantinople is going to be basically always fighting with the Muslims. And the Muslims are going to mostly be back and forth between different dynasties of the Caliphate that are going to be based around Sunni and Shiite Islam. They're going to go back and forth. The first Caliphate, I think it's the Rashidid Caliphate, I could be mistaken, is going to be Sunni. The next Caliphate, the Umayyad Caliphate, I believe is going to be Shia. And then the next caliphate, I think, is going to be Sunni again. But they're basically run by Arabs, and the Arabs are essentially running everything from here to here. Okay, they're all run by Arabs. You're not going to have Persians or Turks try to take over for a while. Okay, these are going to be run by Arabs, but the Byzantines see themselves as getting their butts kicked by these desert nomads all over, despite the fact of they're having heavy cavalry and the latest of tech. They're getting their butt kicks by scimitar wielding, camel riding. They're not all riding camels. They have great horses, and they actually have decent military tactics by this time. But they're mostly successful in the deserts. The Arabs are mostly successful in the deserts because if you notice all this climate down here, most of this is going to be hot, and it's going to be a mix of desert and mountains. Okay, that's why they lose when they get up here, because they're used to using terrain and water and heat and the sun and stuff like that against their enemies. They're good at this because they come from the desert and they've had thousands of years of history of fighting each other over this stuff. Okay, and so they kick butt down here, but once they get into Europe, Charles Martel stomps them out real quick with a much smaller force because, it turns out when we can get water, you're not so tough. Because they're not so tough. They don't have the best technology. They don't have the best resource base. That's why they took this over so easily, because it's all desert around here. So it's like you're mostly just taking over the coastlands because it's all desert. And there's just city here, city here, city here. That's why it's so easy to invade and take over. But what are you going to do to hold it? It's actually amazing to me that there hasn't been a more hardcore colonizing presence of that. But I think that's just because you'd be dealing with terrorism nonstop from insurgencies from people who can live in the desert and come fight back against you. That'd be my guess. Anyways, the caliphate's going to be down here. The Coptic Christians are going to be kind of an underground church. The Jerusalem church is basically underground, but it doesn't really push any authority yet. The church at Antioch is going to be basically underground, and it's going to project into Persia, Assyria, Mesopotamia, and India. They're all going to tie themselves to the Assyrian church. Okay, so there are going to be lands that they have access to that are not dominated by Islam at all, and they're going to keep training up clergy. And because they were the ancient see that sent all them, the Church of Antioch is going to stay relevant. The Church of Alexandria is going to become the Coptic Church. They're not going to be relevant really outside of Alexandria. Jerusalem is basically just going to be a holy site for everyone. They're just going to fight over it till kingdom come. And Constantinople is basically going to be over all of Eastern Christendom. Okay, so what ends up happening is the Muslims are kicking all their butts, and then so they're already starting to look at this as this is not favorable to us. We have no idea why. We clearly have the one true religion with the one true God, and yet they're kicking our butts all over kingdom come. Why is this happening? And the Muslims are going to then, the whole time after they conquer them, they allow people to keep trading in Byzantine coins because they're not stupid. They want their economy to be good. And so they're going to allow people to trade back and forth because while they're fighting, you have to remember, these people are going to rape and pillage and do all kinds of stuff on every side. The Franks, none of these guys are really civilized. When your army sacks their city, you're going to rape and pillage and steal all people's stuff and rape their women and steal their kids for slaves and do all this stuff, okay? But you're not going to keep doing that. Once you've conquered them and once you've humiliated them, you want the economy to go on as normal so that you have stability in your rule. And so then what the Muslims are going to do is basically say, you just need to pay us the jizya tax so we can keep financing our armies, and the guys who collect the jizya tax are responsible to give zakat because they're Muslims, which is going to keep the poor from getting too poor and too numerous, while keeping the middle class and the rich from ever forming a successful rebellion against them. And that's why the Muslims have ruled ever since all these lands. That's why the Christians have never taken them back. Because in the Christian church, these guys would have to pay heavy taxes to Rome to fuel their losing armies and their losing battles because they're all idolaters and God's not favoring them. And then you would have to pay heavy tithes. You would have to pay tithes and first fruit offerings to the priesthood. And then Roman actually worked out this thing called the annuary, where every time a new bishop would come in, half the tithes for a year they would have to pay to Rome. You know how rich Rome is getting during this era? Hugely rich, okay? And think about that. Imagine half of your every time you guys get a new pastor, new teacher, which is going to happen every half a decade. Maybe if you got an awesome, because it's always going to be some older guy, okay? And then that older guy is going to be there for maybe 10 years. I mean, some of these guys would last 30, 40 years, but most of the time it's like 10 years or less. And every time you get a new one, half of the tithes for that whole year go to Rome in order for Rome to certify that bishop. And if you didn't have a certified bishop, well, you weren't part of the one true church. And you could be in trouble and you can go to hell. This is awful. This is so awful the more you read about this stuff. So anyways, the Constantinople is basically going to keep losing to these guys, and then the Muslims are going to stop trading in the Byzantine coins because the Byzantines have this stupid idea of putting Jesus' face on their coins because we're Christendom, right? And the Jews and the Muslims, who the Jews are largely involved in international mercantilism, because they got kicked out of Jerusalem and they've been basically wandering around as merchants and usurers, and they can't own land in any of these Christian territories because they're Jews. And so they would basically be a merchant class of people, and they would either have stores, they would buy, sell, and trade, maybe some crafts, and banking would be a big thing they'd get into, okay? Because what do you do if you have some money and you have some intelligence but you can't own land? Well, you get into mercantilism, okay? And the Jews did not like having these coins with Jesus on them, and the Muslims certainly did not like having these coins with Jesus on them being traded all around their empire, because it probably said something like, let's see, Byzantine Jesus coins. Probably said something like Jesus, the one true God, the Lord of all on it. And I can't read this Greek, but I'll bet you it says something like Jesus, the Son of God, the one true Lord on it. And the Jews and Muslims are just like, hell to the no, dude. We are not trading this coin, okay? And plus, it's a graven image, so screw you guys, okay? So they stopped trading in their coins. This is in the year 722. Do you want to know when iconoclasm started? 726. Your brilliant scholars are trying to tell you we can't really find a definite link between Islamic iconoclasm and destroying idols and refusing to trade in the coins and the iconoclasm of Constantinople and the Eastern Roman Empire. You are so dumb if you think money doesn't drive things. I'm sorry. It's like the scholars are just professional propagandists and want to pretend that money doesn't more money doesn't cause more problems. It's like they need to just stop reading their books and just listen to some gangster rap for a little bit and learn how money works, okay? But anyways, these guys basically are like, not long after that, in 726, there's a volcanic eruption and a bunch of people die. And they start selling to the people that is a sign from God that we need to stop worshiping graven images and we need to get rid of icons, okay? Well, icons have been growing. This is in 787, and icons have been growing hardcore since the era of Nestorius, which is the Council of Chalcedon in like 451. So you're talking about 240 years of people stacking up idols everywhere they go, kissing little saints' amulets, putting food on the graves of their martyrs, and doing their little pilgrimages all over to touch the holy thing, and all this magical crap they do because the churches love it because they get money from it. They love seeing people, they go and they give a little donation, and they go bow down and kiss the dead, decrepit toe of Peter or something, and because somebody has it in a jar and they're going to lick it and get more magical godly juju from it. And the popes are, the bishops are running this all day long because, don't forget, and you're going to find made up stories of martyrs. You're going to find all these legendary accounts. Everybody's martyr's better than the martyr next door. And these people are going to be doing pilgrimages from here all the way to Jerusalem, and every town along the way has got some martyr that you got to go pay homage to and bow down to, and kisses. We've got the knuckle of Saint Bartholomew here, and you need to genuflect and kiss this thing and give us a little donation. Okay, it's the same as when you go to Jerusalem today and you have these stupid guys selling Jesus bookmarks and stuff like that outside the Jerusalem temple. Why? Because religious pilgrimage is the bee's knees of business. Why do you think, for all the corruption we have in our government and in business and all the anti-Christian stuff we have going on, they never go after the televangelists? They respect the crap out of the televangelists. They respect the crap out of the televangelists. You merge the greatest propaganda vehicle of all time with the greatest form of business of all time, and that's this: give me money and I will give you God's favor. That is the best. Anybody who likes business, politics, corruption, and money is going to be like, respect, bro. Kenneth Copeland is a billionaire. Kenneth Copeland is a billionaire because he was a pilot for Oral Roberts, who was an absolute con man, and Kenneth Copeland just learned the game. He's like these guys on the Wolf of Wall Street or the Boiler Room who are selling crap stocks. They don't care if it's a lie. They're just doing it, and then they're banging hookers in between. Like, they don't care if it's a lie. They know if I say it this way, it will sell, and I'm going to make money. That's Kenneth Copeland. Okay? And do you think these Wall Street tycoons don't look at Kenneth Copeland and they're like, that dude knows what they love him. They look at him and they're just like, they know one of their own, okay? And it was always like that. And so these guys were never going to touch the Roman bishops thing, because you know why? When you go to some holy place to do some holy thing, what you're going to need is to eat, and you're going to need a place to have a hospital, or you're going to need to eat, and you're going to need a hotel, okay? And everybody in the upper classes, remember, you had to be upper class in the first place to afford to go on these pilgrimages, because you have to be able to eat and have a place to lay your head so you don't get killed by bandits on the way. And they're going to form whole businesses around this. And so all these little towns, it's going to benefit their whole town, because you know why? Same as today. People like tourism. Tourist trade means a bunch of people who aren't from here come in here and pay excessive amounts of money for our crap. We like that. We can sell stuff to them for double the price because they don't know what the going price is around here. We like that, okay? And so everybody's going to be for this stupid pilgrimage crap, okay? Because it's all about money. People figure out how to capitalize. When you see people going from point A to point B, why the frick do you think the Kaaba house is where it is in Islam? Why do you think it originally had all the idols that were in all of Arabia in one box? Because no matter where you were from, even you might have not seen your hometown in years, but when you get to Mecca, there's the idol that represents my old ancestor. Give it a little kiss, throw a little coin. Detroit. Why do you think I wear Detroit? Why do you think I wear a Detroit hat all the time when I'm not from Michigan? It reminds me of where I'm from. That's where I'm from. I don't live there now. But I can go to Israel and I can see somebody else from Michigan and be like, you're from Michigan, because I have a Detroit hat on. And that's what idolatry was to them. It was hometown. It was these guys who were like, Griggs Street for life. Right? Like these guys who are just like, that's where I'm from. And so they pay a little tribute. And people like this. The traveling merchants, that was all what Arabia was all about. You had nomads and herdsmen and some farmers and stuff, and then you had these traveling merchants coming through. And you collected some munties at Mecca, and that's how Islam's going to rise up, okay? So the Muslims are going to kick their butt. And they're going to start selling this idea that iconoclasm needs to happen because the Muslims are kicking our butt and God gave us a volcano. That's clearly telling them to get rid of these icons. But the bishops are not liking this. Dude, no. We got a good thing going on here. We need you to find some other reason to stir your people up against the Muslims and get the favor of God. Why don't you give more power to the Roman popes. And then the Constantinopolitan Patriarch is like, hey, no. Why don't you give more power to the Constantinopolitan Patriarch and get more of God's favor, biatch? And this is how it's going to go down. Basically the guy who is in charge of the Constantinopolitan Church, the Patriarch, is going to step down. He's either going to be stepped down or deposed. Nobody knows what happened. Tell you what happened. He wouldn't play ball, and so he got deposed. And he gets replaced with a guy who's an iconoclast. Next thing you know, iconoclasm is the bee's knees, and we're going to go around smashing idols, and we're going to do all this stuff. And it just so happens, once they start smashing their idols, they stop losing their battles to the Arabs. That just so happens. Now, never mind there's rivals for power in the Arabs before that. They got the favor of God now because they're smashing idols too. Okay? And these guys are basically going to have iconoclasm go on for maybe 20, 30 years where they're getting rid of idols and stuff like that. And the Roman Catholic bishops are not liking this. And really, a lot of the Eastern bishops aren't liking it either because they like their tourist trade as well. And basically, these guys are going to get together. First, Rome is just going to have its own little council, and they're going to anathematize destroying idols. We don't like you smashing idols. How dare you? You're anathematized if you do that. Constantinople's going to give them the finger and keep doing it. And then, after one of the descendants of the emperor, who is an iconoclast, dies, the bishops are going to talk his wife into reinstituting idols. And they're going to do this twice. That's how they're going to stop iconoclasm twice. Why? Because literally from the days of Porphyry in the 3rd century, this is in the days of Origen and Porphyry. Porphyry called out Christianity. You know what he said? This is when they're first starting to become celibate monks. They said this is a woman's religion. They said whoever has the favor of the upper class women end up being the bishops. Why? Because who can talk in the ear of the upper class men and the emperors and that? The women. And all they're doing, this is just like Paul says about the false prophets, they worm their way into the homes of weak-willed women, always laden with sins. In other words, they're always guilty of their sins because they're the weaker vessel, always learning and never coming to the knowledge of the truth. Now look, if I was going to spend the rest of my life beating myself up over my sins, oh my gosh, I would never stop groveling. I would never do anything for God because I would be too busy groveling and feeling guilty over my sins. What I need to understand is God is holy and he hates sins. But what he wants from me is to repent of my sins and turn around and stop doing them. He doesn't want me to spend 5 seconds of my time beating up on myself for having done them after I'm done. He doesn't want me to do that. He wants me to go back to glorifying him with my life. This thing called penance is not something we do in Christianity. It's not something you were supposed to do in Judaism. That's why they would have all these sacrifices that would publicly atone for your sin and say your conscience is clean. There you go. All the sins are paid for. They would keep doing this because they knew Christ was going to come and pay for your sins. And God knows we have a wicked enemy that's always deceiving us to sin. And what he wants to do, he wants from us, is repentance. He doesn't want penance. Penance doesn't help God at all. But it certainly helps your bishops. It certainly helps your Roman Catholic priests. It certainly helps people who want to capitalize and gain power over you not being ashamed enough. And that's the power the devil uses. I need to keep you ashamed. That's why Canaan was cursed, because Ham pointed out the nakedness of his father, because it signified the shame of sin. I'm shaming you over your sin, and Noah cursed that. You're cursed. Why? You're shaming me over my sin? God covers sin. The devil exposes sin. Okay? Now, we point out sin when the sin exposes itself and say, that's not good, you need to stop. But we don't sit there keep beating up on somebody who's repentant. We don't bring up past sins. It's covered by the blood. You don't bring it up. That's something God hates. You don't bring up somebody's past sins like that. Okay? If they've repented. Now, I'm not talking about somebody who's just like, that dude stole from me and he has never apologized. Every time you see him, you should call him out. It's not your job to be like, hey, I owe you forgiveness, so it's my job to never bring up the fact again that you stole from me. No. The Bible doesn't tell you to do that either. So if your brother sins against you, go and tell him. If he doesn't repent, go and bring another witness. If he still doesn't repent, go and tell the church. And you don't stop telling anyone until that guy repents. We live in an age with no church discipline, and people don't do this. Okay? And they literally will go to the person who's never been reconciled because the person has sinned against them and they never repent. And they go to that person and then they say, you have a root of bitterness and unforgiveness and you need to repent. What about the guy who slandered me? What about the guy who snuck into my house and stole my business? Do they need to repent? It's not about them, dude. It's about you. And this is how the wicked maintain power over the righteous. They never repent, and they make it about you and about your attitude and your tone and all this other stuff instead of about the truth. Okay? But once somebody repents, it's done. You don't ever bring it up again unless you want to incur the judgment of God. Okay? So these guys are going to be iconoclasts, and twice in the course of 100 years, they're going to have an emperor. The first one is going to know if the Muslims beating them and the volcano thing, and maybe it's all just about the money. Probably is. But the second one is going to be legit, okay? The second one is going to be the guy who loses, basically who concedes to Charlemagne being the emperor, and after that, he's going to be so ashamed of himself, he's going to abdicate the throne, okay? He's not able to make a dent in Charlemagne's kingdom. He's just able to get Venice back. And Venice is basically the Latin merchants who are in Constantinople. So they're right here. Constantinople's right here. And needless to say, if you own these two hubs right here, that is a pretty good trade network. Okay? But they're Latins. And they follow Latin Rite Christianity. And because of that, you're going to have an enclave of Latin Rite Christians in Constantinople. So this guy, and his name is Leo III, he is going to be pretty ashamed, and he is going to abdicate the throne, and he is going to join a monastery. And then the next guy is going to be Michael the Armenian, I believe, Michael I, the Armenian. He's going to take the throne. And he's going to have Leo III's descendants castrated, so he's going to try to form a dynasty, and he needs to castrate his opponent so nobody else can have heirs that can compete with him, and put them in the monastery. And then he's going to go look over the history of the kings in the centuries before him, and he's going to be like, you know what? All the guys who are iconodules, which are basically the people who would genuflect and kiss and bow down to these idols, all died in battle, or they died in civil uprisings. And all of the guys who were iconoclasts died peacefully in their beds. This iconoclasm thing is on. And he's going to reinstitute iconoclasm. They're going to start smashing idols and doing all this stuff all over. And he is actually going to start winning battles against Arabs. Okay? And this is going to go on for a while, and he's going to be pushing back. And then when his son dies, his wife, again, they're going to talk his wife into reinstituting graven images in the church. And that's pretty much it for Constantinople by that point. They're in decline ever since then. They just keep losing territory after that. Why? Because they're totally convicted that they're idol worshippers, and they're trying to change, and the church won't let them. That's why. Even the Franks, including Charlemagne, did not like all this bowing down to little idols and stuff. But they knew by this time that their power was entirely based on the popes, and the popes could turn on them because the popes turned on Clovis before them. And they know these popes are treacherous as all get out. And if we don't genuflect to these popes and their little icons and crap like this stuff was going on in Alexandria literally hundreds of years before this with Cyril and Theophilus. Go watch the movie Agora, where they the bishop holds up the Bible to the local magistrate who's over all of Alexandria, and he's like, do you submit to the word of God? And if they say yes, he's like, then bow to the word of God. And this bishop would stand holding the Bible, and they were all expected to bow to the Bible, which is really getting them to bow to the bishop. And they know what they're doing. This is a punk move. And they would use this power against them, and if they didn't submit, they would get their people to riot against them. Or they would support another, rival king or whatever against them all throughout the Germans. They know how the game is played because they were the first ones to play it. the house of Charlemagne was never meant to be in charge anyways. This should have all been Merovingian. And that's why the Rosicrucians are going to pop up in the 17th century, because they are the bitter, defeated, betrayed house. And they're going to come up with this false occultic legend of Jesus Christ having children with Mary Magdalene, and them being the rightful heirs of Jesus himself. That's how sick this gets. Okay? Anyways, back to Constantinople. These guys are going to be iconoclasts for a while, and then they're going to back down. And what really the Muslims aren't really able to push back these mountains and defeat them here, again, because they've got water and they've got sea trade, and they're not just trying to hold a desert against them. And so the Muslims aren't really that good when you're not trying to hold the desert. They are Muslims, at least. But then the Seljuk Turks are going to come through, and the Seljuk Turks, think of them like the Huns. These are guys on horses. These guys have armor. They have bows. They come from mountainous terrain. They know how to move and mobilize, and they know how to hit and run, and they know how to do all this stuff. They've been doing it for centuries. And Constantinople's been getting their butts kicked by the Huns up here, which is what led them to incorporate the Goths, which is just what led the Goths and the Germanic tribes to take over Western Europe. Okay? They are not good against these roving horse lords. Nobody south of the Caucasus has ever been good against these roving horse lords, which is why Bulgaria is right here, and it used to be a lot bigger kingdom, and Hungary is right here, and that used to be a lot bigger kingdom. Because nobody knows how to stop these horse lords. Because if you get to the point where you're beating them, these guys are nomadic. They're going to pull all their camps like Native Americans taking their teepees away. And they're going to basically just keep pulling your armies back into their deep, deep, deep territories here. And then eventually they're going to surround them, cut off their supply lines, and shoot them with arrows until they're all dead. And then they're going to come back and do it again. And meanwhile, they're nomadic people who are like the Native Americans with their teepees and stuff, are going to drag their supplies back and reconquer those lands again. While you're trying to rebuild your armies while your government's falling apart back home because you're so stupid as to go try to invade Siberia with a bunch of guys in armor that weighs a ton, and away from your supply lines and away from your shipping and your Mediterranean where all the good stuff is. Okay? You didn't try to fight these guys. You basically tried to hire other barbarian tribes to stand their ground against them and basically take all the losses, and then those barbarian tribes would end up getting ticked off, and they would end up overthrowing you. And that's why the whole world is classified, even in Paul's day, as Greeks, Romans, barbarians, and Scythians. The Scythians were the ones you didn't want to F with. The barbarians were the ones that you saw yourself as better than. We're civilized, the Greeks and Romans. The barbarians are not civilized, and the Scythians are just deadly. Like, just don't mess with the Scythians. And the Scythians are going to be the predecessors to the Huns, to the Seljuk Turks, to the Ottoman Turks are actually going to come out of the Seljuk, so they're not really like that. But to the Mongols, they're just going to keep coming, and eventually they're going to, kind of be part of the Russian Empire. You're going to have the what are they called? The Khazars in the Crimea is going to be part of the Russian Empire. Okay. You're going to have these horse lords keep coming. Even before them, you had the Sarmatians. Go watch the King Arthur movie with, what's her face in it? Legs. Pirates of the Big Caribbean Girl. Elizabeth Swan, or whatever her face is. She's in the Arthur movie, okay? That's where they get the Sarmatian knights, and they bring them over to England, and the Sarmatians are just awesome on horses. Okay, why? Because they're from the Ukraine, and they know what it's like out there. You got to get these horses, and you got to be able to ride, and you got to be able to fight on these horses, or these Scythians are going to tear you up, right? So anyways, the Seljuk Turks come raiding in here, and they're going to basically take over Persia. They're going to sack Baghdad. They're going to take over pretty much Mesopotamia and Persia, and then they're going to plow in here and start attacking the Byzantines. And the Byzantines are going to lose a bad battle to them at Manzikert. This is going to be around 1071, okay? So these guys just had a great schism over this, okay? Now here's how the great schism is going to go down. The Normans, remember these people who I told you who are going to be a mixture of Vikings, Romans, and Franks, those are the Normans. And the Normans are eventually going to take over in England. But right now, the Normans are going to rove down here, and they're going to pillage, and they're going to take over Italy. Okay? And they're Catholics. So the Romans are going to be okay with this. The Romans are okay with anything that expands their own power. They are absolute whores. They are not loyal to any secular government. They are fine with the people who are pro-Roman Catholic raping and pillaging the people who aren't, even if they're other Christians. Okay? And so they take over and they sack southern Italy. And the Roman bishops come in and they're just like, okay, you guys have to worship in Latin Rite now, because this was following Eastern Rite before that. And they're going to say you have to worship in Latin Rite now. And they're going to make them use unleavened bread in their Eucharist. Why? Because Tertullian taught that when Christ was incarnated, they're already going to have this fight over whether Christ was the actual body of Mary. Because the Origenists had been putting together a false genealogy and a false theory, and supposedly this story that they got from Jerusalem that was saved by the family of James, that was trying to prove that Mary was a perpetual virgin. This comes from the East, not from the West. And that Joseph's kids were not his kids, Joseph's kids were not Mary's kids. So all Jesus' brothers were Joseph's kids, but not Mary's. And then that both genealogies from Mary and Joseph, the Luke and Matthew genealogies, are both Joseph's genealogy. Because what they're doing is they're slowly edging towards deifying Mary. They're trying to get to a place where they eventually start teaching people that Mary was immaculate. The Immaculate Conception of Mary, it's not. They never teach the Immaculate Conception of Jesus. They teach the Immaculate Conception of Mary. Where do you think the next phase is going after people are all buying onto the Immaculate Conception of Mary? And that's that Mary was divinely born. They are systematically, remember, they have gotten rid of the idea of the feminine Holy Spirit. They started teaching that basically wisdom and Logos were both in Jesus, okay? They're systematically replacing the Holy Spirit with Mary now, okay? And so what they're going to do, and they just don't have time to pull it off before the Muslims take over, is teach that Mary was the incarnation of the Holy Spirit and Jesus was the incarnation of the Logos. They know their Bibles are wrong. They know wisdom from the Old Testament is the Logos, and that's why they're building towards that over time. First, Mary is a perpetual virgin. Then we're going to say in the days of John of Damascus, this is the same guy who calls out Islam for the first time, he's going to preach that Mary was assumed into heaven. They're going to say that happened with Mary. The rest of us go to Sheol and have to work out purgatory, but Mary ascended into heaven. Then they're going to say that Mary was immaculately conceived when they start saying that Jesus came from her body. They are heading back towards the idea that the Holy Spirit is the feminine and the mother of God. But what they're doing is they're doing it through Mary. And the next phase, this is as far as they get, is Mary being immaculately conceived. And that's when they all start falling apart and fighting the Crusades and stuff like that. So they never get to the point where they can popularize the doctrine that Mary is the incarnation of the Holy Spirit. But I promise you that's where they're going. They're calling her the co-mediatrix. Who mediates with us? Who's when Jesus says, I'm going to send you another helper, another advocate, that's what a mediator is, okay? So they're calling Mary the co-mediatrix instead of the Holy Spirit. They're literally giving the Queen of Heaven, the Mother of God, they're literally giving all the titles that would rightly belong to the Holy Spirit. If you understood the Holy Spirit as a type of God's wife and Jesus' mother, they're taking all these titles and they're giving them to Mary. And then they're saying Mary is immaculately conceived because they're heading in the direction of saying that Mary is the incarnation of the Holy Spirit. I promise you that's where they were going, okay? Because these guys know about the slow, gradual rollout of a lie. That's what they've been doing. They're masters of this, okay? So anyways, what you're going to have here now is all this iconoclasm, all this Mary worship going on. And the popes are going to push unleavened bread because Tertullian taught that when Jesus was incarnated, he purified his flesh, okay? And then they're eventually going to say, no, he didn't purify his flesh. Mary's flesh was already pure. That's where the Immaculate Conception of Jesus comes in, okay? Or the Immaculate Conception of Mary comes in. So Jesus didn't need to purify her flesh. It was already pure. And because they know leaven represents the corruption of sin, and the original Eucharist was always with leaven, because there's literally prophecies in Amos that talk about offering up a thanksgiving, which is what Eucharist means, with leavened bread. And the Feast of First Fruits has leavened bread in it, and they never put it together. That's because Jesus came in sinful flesh. They never put it together, but they have the leavened bread in the East, and they have their different reasons, because they say, some of them are going to say that the leaven, Irenaeus is going to say that the leaven represents Christ, and the lump is us. He's going to mix two parts of Corinthians together to get there. You're going to have the Clementine and Origenist Alexandrians are going to say that the soul is passible and therefore corruptible, and that represents Christ gaining a soul when he was incarnated, and that's why it has leaven in it. Nobody's going to just go full bore and say, no, he came in the likeness of sinful flesh. That means the likeness of sinful flesh means he had sinful flesh. He came in the likeness of sinful flesh. He was made in the likeness of sinful flesh. How can it be the likeness of sinful flesh if it doesn't have all the same sinful inclinations of our flesh? Let's think about that. How can he come in the likeness of sinful flesh and be tempted in all points we're tempted if his flesh doesn't have the same nature as ours? That they're not going to get it. They never get it. To this day, no branch of Christendom has ever gotten this. Jesus came in sinful flesh, but he didn't obey its inclinations. That's why what he did is so miraculous and so powerful and so distinct in nature from us, because he had eternal life from his incarnation. But we are born into this world without eternal life. We do have, our spirits are before God, but they can fall. And we need to be born again. That's why, okay? So anyways, they're going to make them do leavened bread. The Bishop of Constantinople is not going to like this. And so what he's going to do is they're basically threatening them. You have to do our Latin rite with unleavened bread, or we're going to close your churches. Bishop of Constantinople is going to be like, no, that's bullcrap. He's going to have a guy who's preaching against this and saying, this is the original apostolic tradition. These guys are corrupting the original apostolic tradition. They don't know what the tradition means. They just know it's original. And then they're going to, in turn, close down the Latin churches. Remember, they have Venetian Latin merchants there, and so they're going to close down the Latin churches in Constantinople in retaliation. And then after this is going to be around the time when the Seljuk Turks are invading, and they're losing to the Arabs and stuff like this. And they need help. And so they're going to appeal to Rome, and they're going to say, okay, first of all, the Normans just took this over. Okay? Now the Normans are Catholic, and that's how they got their Catholic power in there. And the Byzantines are going to say, okay, we want the Romans to help us. Because the Normans aren't under the authority of the Franks, okay? The Franks are really the allies to the popes, and the Normans are under their authority. They're a separate tribe. They're really Vikings at their head, okay? And Constantinople is going to call the bishop up and say, hey, bro, we need your help organizing a crusade, if you will. Winch, like a holy war to get these Normans out of our territories in the south of Italy. What do you say? And Rome is going to basically send legates back with a secret message that says, I'll tell you what, I'll think about it, but while I am here, I need your ecumenical patriarch, who's supposedly over the whole church in the empire, to submit to me as the head of the whole church and to tell his bishop over here to stop preaching against our unleavened bread. How does that sound? And the Bishop of Constantinople is like, that is a bunch of crap, dude. No. He is pulling rank. Don't do that. No. And the Byzantines are not liking this. They're like, they know he's using this to say, I will help the Byzantine. This is what they're doing. Remember? The Roman bishops are whore supremes. I mean, don't get me wrong. Most of them are. But the Romans are whore supremes by these times. And Romans are basically telling you, you sell out your church to me, and I'll sell out my Germanic Catholic allies to you. These popes are master whores, okay? Like, they will betray anyone to gain more power for themselves. And the Orthodox stop this from happening. But what it ends up in is the Great Schism, okay? These people, listen, you're gonna go to seminary and you're gonna learn about the Great Schism. They're gonna be like, oh, there were some conflicts about tradition and about iconoclasm and about who's in charge of the church. And they're never gonna tell you the politics that were going on underneath. They're never going to tell you how cynical and evil and traitorous and wicked this is. These guys don't give a crap about idol worship. They don't give a crap about how you do the Eucharist this way or that. It's all about power. He's literally just like, he doesn't give a crap if you use leavened or unleavened bread. He's just like, give me more power over the whole church, and I'll give you your lands back. He's doing the exact same thing that his predecessors did with the Frankish kings when they got the frickin' first Catholic Germans betrayed and overthrown by the Carolinians. Okay? So these people smell what's going down, and they oppose it. The Byzantines oppose it, and that's where the Great Schism comes from. They're whores, but they have been out-whored. Now imagine this. You literally got like, yeah, I'm with this girl, and I got her to cheat on her husband with me, and now we're married. Do I trust her? I mean, she cheated on her husband with me. We're pretty tight, right? And then this other girl comes along. And she's like, you obviously have no morals, so I'm going to get you away from your woman. Why? Because I'm younger and better looking, and she's had 2 of your kids now. And you're like, it is true, she is better looking, and that is true, I have no morals. And these two hoes are going to compete over you, who's a hoe to begin with. You're a male hoe. And you're trying to figure out how to work this to your advantage. And you don't realize you have two contentious women fighting over you. There is no situation in this where you as a man are going to win this game. I don't care if you're Andrew Tate. You are not going to win this game. Your money is gone. They're going to clean you out. You have two hoes. None of them are trustworthy. They're going to get your money and you're gone. You're to the poorhouse. And that's what happens with Constantinople. And so you have the Great Schism, and these two hoes are fighting over this man who really isn't their rightful, either one of them's rightful husband, right? Because their husband is supposed to be Christ. And you have these two hoes fighting over this man. And that's how you get 2 of the 3 loaves of bread that are leavened. The third one is going to be your Protestant church. And I'm going to get into that. It's all going to be in my book. Listen, my book is going to be, if any of you guys have access to the channel of Gavin Ortland, my book is going to be the antithesis of theological triage. Rightly dividing is the answer to theological triage. I'm going to expose the bullcrap and tell you here's what real Christianity is. Get on board. Stop trying to have Christendumb 2.0. Stop trying to be toxically positive and trying to say nice, nondescript, and false concessionary things in order to have peace when there is no peace. You need to stand and you need to let the power of God decide who's with him and who's not. That's what rightly dividing is all about. Okay? And so what I'm doing is I'm basically going, okay, you got this going on here. Here's how the Crusades start now. This is just after this. Rome has now asserted themselves as the head over all Christianity. The East has broken away. Rome is like, okay, I need you to go down. Remember, I will betray Christians to see you go down. This is what I do with my rivals. I will betray Christian kings. I will betray Christian emperors. I will betray Christian lay people and whole populations who are going to get raped and pillaged to see my power go up and yours go down. It's on. And immediately after this, I mean within like 20 years of this, they start with the Crusades. Okay? Your seminaries aren't going to tell you this. Your Western Civ classes aren't going to tell you this. That As a direct response to this, the Crusades start happening, okay? Now here's what's going to go on. The Latin Venetians, who have the power of the more powerful empire on their hand, and they know it, they're trading back and forth in Constantinople, and they get more and more and more uppity. And eventually they get to the point where they're getting riotous in Constantinople. Mind you, these Latin foreigners who are basically just business people, okay, that have moved into your city, and they're in here, and they're shipping, and they're going back and forth, and they're becoming the upper class now. And they're getting more and more uppity against the people of Constantinople, and they get to the point where they're getting riotous, and they're wrecking stuff because they're rich and they can get away with what they want. These are like the rich kids, spoiled brats who like. I used to live in this house up the street from the Van Andels, and these punk ass kids would just it's 5 a.m, drive their car as loud as they can by my house and stuff like that. I would have these guys riding in there, these kids, and these are a Van Andel kid. Why? Because they're notorious a-holes. These are rich kids. Their parents founded Amway. They've got people in their family in the Trump administration. These people are notorious rich kid a-holes. And these people, I would have these people on my butt. I'm going 10 miles over the speed limit. They're on my butt flipping me off when I'm just driving because they're driving some Maserati or something down a road, which is like, dude, there's houses and children on this road. What the frick are you doing? And these people, like, we had a guy in our hockey team in high school. These Van Andel kids busted him over the head with a hockey stick, gave him like 18 stitches, and then just bought him a truck and paid him off. This is how rich kids are, okay? And these are the rich kids here. And these rich kids are basically going to just run amok in Constantinople, and they're Latin right, and they're better than you, and all this crap. And eventually the Constantinopolitans are going to get sick of this crap, and they're going to just massacre them. A mob is just going to massacre them, and the emperor is going to look the other way. Sick of this crap. That was not smart of the emperor, because they were their main economic link to them. He should have figured out how to tax the crap out of them instead of just letting people mob on them. But he's dealing with bitter hatred of nominal Christians going back and forth and plugging for power, okay? Their bishop tried to assert himself as the head over the whole church, and what they ended up with is the Pope's asserting himself as the head over the whole church. They did not get their lands back in southern Italy. Those are now practicing Latin Rite, and now you have people practicing Latin Rite right in Constantinople giving you the finger and being rich while your people are getting poorer because all your lands are getting taken over by Islam, okay? And so they're going to massacre these Latins. And this is going to happen at the end of the 11th century. Okay. Well, the Roman Catholics after this, they're going to this is within. This is the beginning of the 12th century where that happens. At the end of the 11th century, they call for aid against the Seljuk Turks because the Seljuk Turks are beating the crap out of them, and they lose a big battle to them at Manzikert right here, and the Seljuk Turks kind of settle in here. And at that time, the Seljuk Turks are pretty much have taken over the caliphate. Okay, this is all run by Arabs. Egypt is run by Arabs, but Seljuk Turks and the Mamluks are going to come from the Turks as well. They're basically going to take over the caliphate, and they're Islamic now, so they've got this whole resource base backing them up. Okay, and these guys know how to fight, and these guys are on horses, and these guys are playing the game of the Scythians, and now they've got Muslim barbarian hordes with a good economy behind them. Okay, and so they're attacking Constantinople, and they call Rome for help, and they literally for a while are trying to negotiate. These emperors are negotiating to give the Roman pontiffs authority over the whole church in exchange for the military aid they need against the Muslims. Well, the popes are going to like this, but they can't. This guy can't get the Byzantines to sign on for this. Okay. And so the popes are going to be like, you know what, you guys, we need to have a holy war and go take back Jerusalem and stuff like this. And they do. They take Jerusalem all the way down to the Red Sea. They take what's now Lebanon. They take basically Damascus, Antioch, this area up here, and they take this area of Edessa up here, okay? And so what they do is they cut off the Seljuks, and the Seljuk kingdom dwindles down here, and they make a wall between the Seljuks and the rest of the Muslims. So the Seljuks are basically going to dwindle down to here, and they're not going to make a comeback until the Ottoman Turks centuries later, okay? And for 200 years, they're going to hold these crusader states. And out of these crusader states, they're going to have the Knights Templar emerge. They're going to have all these different monastic orders and orders of knights and these kingdoms, because these are essentially French and German kingdoms. Okay, they're really mostly French knights and stuff that are going to come down here, and they're going to form these 4 crusader states, and these are kingdoms. And then the popes are going to allow different monastic orders to form that basically are militant. And you're going to have these people called the Knights of John and the Hospitalitors, which is where we get hospitals from. And what these people are charged with doing, now you're going to already have these crusader states here with their armies, but what these people are charged with doing is keeping the road from Jerusalem to the west safe. And so these pilgrims can keep doing their pilgrimages, and obviously they're going to come through Constantinople and do their pilgrimages to Jerusalem, and the religious tourism is back on. The Byzantines are happy with this because they have basically cut off the Seljuks from their supply base. And let's see the Crusader states. These are the Crusader states. And so you see the Sultanate of Rum right here. That is the Seljuk Turks. They're going to be reduced down to this, but they're not going to be able to have a united front against them. And it just so happens during this era, you're going to have other Mongols and stuff like that, and you're going to still have Hunnic kingdoms and stuff like that. And so they're not necessarily going to have the dominance of Central Asia coming to help them, and they're not going to exactly have the massive economy of the Caliphate coming to help them. And so they're going to dwindle over here, and that's good for the Byzantines. So the Byzantines get a respite. They kind of have a little bit of a economic revival and a little bit of growth after this. And the Crusader states are going to run right here. Well, the Knights Templar are going to form as basically they're going to arise as the main financial monastic order that is going to run stuff. And the Templars are going to be involved with Venetian merchants. They're going to be involved with Jewish financiers. They're going to be involved with donors who are going to donate lands and farms and businesses and all kinds of stuff for them. So they're going to have a supply chain backing them up. And they are really the first international conglomerate corporation. These guys are going to have their own mercenaries. And these guys have taken vows of celibacy. They don't have heirs. They have secret rites of initiation. And the Knights Templar are going to be super BA all throughout Europe. Because what they're doing is they're basically the muscle behind this tourist trade, which is totally beneficial to the whole Catholic Church. Remember, the whole Catholic Church is making money. The whole Catholic and Orthodox Church is all making money off of these pilgrimages. And these are now pretty much all Latin Rite states, okay? And you're going to have, the other guys in Byzantium, and they're going to make a little bit of money off the Byzantine, but between them and them is the Seljuk Turks. And they're going to need the Knights Templar to get safely from point A to point B. And so all your religious upper-class people are going to go on these religious tours, and they're going to drop money to all these Roman Catholic Church. And remember, these guys all have to pay half of their tithes every time they get a new bishop right up to Rome. That's called the annate. And so Rome's making a ton of money. These bishops are making decent money off these basically rich Franks and Germans and stuff like that. And then the Templars are making money because the Templars have all these donors because they are pretty much the Blackwater. In fact, Blackwater actually brands themselves as New Knights Templar because what they're doing is they are now a place for people who just want to fight to keep fighting for a good cause. They're a place for guilty knights who've raped and pillaged to go get absolution because the Pope is promising them absolution if they go fight in the Crusades. They're a place for people to send one of their sons to join so they don't have a rivalry between their sons over which son gets to inherit the lands and their fiefdom or whatever. And so they're going to be adding their sons to it. And then what you're going to end up with is a network that's like 10% soldiers, 90% business financing it. It's a true international army, okay? It's a true international army, that answers to the head of a monastic order with secret rites of initiation. Okay? The popes are fine with this because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Everyone's making money, and this is good. But eventually, Saladin is going to come along, and he is going to sack all this crap, and he's had it. He's going to unify the Muslims. He's going to get the Muslims to stop being superstitious idiots and start learning how to fight and quit being so religious. And he is going to invade, and he's going to sack Jerusalem, and he's going to sack all these Crusader states from them. Okay? And this is about 200 years later. And at that point, they have no more use for the Knights Templar. And the Knights Templar have a lot of money, a lot of power, a good-sized army spread over Europe, and an intelligence network that is better than the popes. Remember, the popes had the ultimate intelligence network. Okay? The reason that they're so good at influencing politics is because they have people all over the Mediterranean that are religiously bound to keep secrets of their confessors, but can share it with the popes. And so you literally have a CIA going on in Europe, and you basically have a fake U.S. president in the Frankish Holy Roman Emperors, which are now German, but you have a CIA in the Roman Catholic Church, which has intel from outside of their grasp. They have intel all over their emperor. They know what the people at the grassroots think. They know what their rivals are thinking. They're getting everybody's sins confessed. They have all the dirt. These guys have, you have not had a rival to this until you have the NSA start tapping everyone's phones. You have not had a better intelligence network. But now you have a rival to this network in the Templars. Because the Templars know all the business interests. They know all the lords. They know everybody. They know the Muslims. They know the Muslim secret orders of the assassins. They know, the drama that's going on behind the priests, and they're armed to the teeth, and they do nothing but fight and kill. Okay, and they've got business assets all over. And so what happens? Well, what the popes do best. We're going to have a little deal. Okay, and so what you end up with is Philip IV. Philip IV is the King of France, and he is in debt up to his eyeballs. Okay? He is in debt up to his eyeballs primarily to, apparently, French chicks were just hot. And in order to get a French chick, you had to have a nice dowry. And apparently French chicks were always uppity, and he had to pay a big dowry to somebody. And he's borrowing money from the Jewish bankers, and he's borrowing money from the Templars to advance his power. Okay? And now the Crusades are over. And he knows the Templars, the popes have no more need for the Templars. And what he's going to do is first he's going to go at Pope Boniface. Because Pope, what he's trying to do, remember, he is fighting in the 100 Years' War against England by this time. Okay? And what he's trying to do, no, I'm sorry, the 100 Years' War hasn't started yet. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. What he's trying to do is fight England. And he is running out of money because of these stupid crusades, which they've lost. And what he's going to try to do is talk the popes into letting him take money from the church to finance his wars. And the popes are like, heck to no, dude. You are not touching our cheese. You need to figure this out. Maybe you need to give us some more money so you have God's favor, but you are not taking our monies, okay? And he doesn't like that. So he kidnaps Pope Boniface, and this is the start of the Avignon papacy. This is the Babylonian captivity of the church. He kidnaps the papacy to Avignon. He beats up this guy, bullies him for a while, then he lets him go. The guy leaves, and he dies not long afterwards because he's an old man, okay? But then Clement V, this is Pope Clement V, is going to be his puppet. And Pope Clement V is going to get elected as Pope against contenders and immediately move to Avignon. He's got the next Pope now, okay? And this Pope is going to ally with him as he betrays the Knights Templar. And so what he does to the Knights Templar is he is going, remember, the popes have already, listen, the popes have already betrayed the Merovingians, which is where the Rosicrucian cult is going to come from. Okay? Now they're going to betray the Knights Templar, which is where the Freemason cult is going to come from. This is you can't make this stuff up. It's so gross. Okay, so what you're going to have is you're going to have the Knights Templar. He is going to have a bunch of them seized and tortured and forced to admit that they've been involved in spitting on the cross and worshiping Satan and sodomizing each other and all this stuff to be initiated. Like, those are their secret initiation rites. What are their secret initiation rites? I have no idea. I mean, they probably got involved with Islamic and Jewish mysticism. There's probably some stuff involved with what later would become, because Kabbalah is just starting to emerge after this. And it seems like what you have in Kabbalah, and you also have like the Shriners is going to emerge not long after this, and the Freemasons are going to emerge not long after this. Okay? So what it seems to be is that there was a mixing of ideas coming from the original Jewish, Christian, and Islamic Gnostic sources that basically eventually created Kabbalah, Freemasonry, the Shriners, and then of course on the surface you're going to have like Sufism and Christian mysticism and stuff like that. And the guys, you're going to have stuff emerge like, the guys who came up with the Enneagram and crap like that. Okay, the guys who came up with that stuff is later on, but it's that same mystical bullcrap that is going to come back in these forms. Okay. The Templars probably were involved with some stuff like that because they were mixing it up with everybody, and they just had secret orders and they were monks, and who knows what was going on. Was there homosexuality going on with them? Probably. Honestly, you have a bunch of celibate warriors and they all have squires. And what were the Spartans like? So probably. And probably the same stuff is going on throughout the whole Roman Catholic Church because they're all celibate at this time. So if you want to throw the accusation of sodomy at people, you're going to have a lot of takers, right? It's like the devil going around in present-day America and telling everybody that, they got a spirit of lust. Why? Porn is everywhere in America. If I can't go a week on purpose without seeing what used to be considered porn 20 years ago. Women wear less clothes at the coffee shop than they would wear at the beach 20 years ago. Well, maybe not that bad. They had bikinis and stuff. But I mean, women at the coffee shop are not wearing much. And what they are wearing is skin tight. Trust me, it leaves nothing to the imagination, okay? So if a demon goes around and tells people, you got a spirit of lust, you got a spirit of lust, well, everyone's fighting against lust all the time. So, well, same thing when you have a whole celibate priesthood and a bunch of celibate monks. Think there's a little buggering going on? Yeah, there's some buggering going on. This is not natural. So yes, there's some buggering going around. And what do they have? What's the closest thing to a woman that they can get their hands on without getting defrocked? How about their young altar boys and their young monks and their young squires? So yeah, it was going on. Okay. But are we going to prove this? No, because no scholars are going to actually be like, and I saw him buggering the lad, and I didn't do anything about it, and I wrote it down for posterity. Nope. Sorry, none of these scholars are going to write that down. Okay, so we don't have proof of this. Okay? But Philip is going to have them all tortured, get them to confess. He is going to have a bunch of them burned at the stake. The popes are going to disband the Knights Templar, and then they are going to basically seize all their holdings. That takes care of Philip of France's money problems, because after that he's going to expel the Jews from France, and his money problems are solved. He just stole all the Templars' money. The Pope stole all the rest of it, and all their holdings and all their lands and stuff like that, and all their businesses. And they had managers, and I promise they kept those managers in charge and kept those income streams flowing. And the popes got richer and richer and richer. And the king of France got richer and richer and richer. But here was the problem. These guys, so this is Jacques de Molay, okay? He's the head of the Templar, is going to famously tell them that we're all going to be standing before God pretty soon. So I don't know, maybe this guy was legit. Maybe he was, not as legit as you can be as a Roman Catholic monk, but maybe he was like literally zealously fervent in what he was doing. But this guy tells them before they kill him, he refuses absolution. He refuses to submit to anything they're doing because he knows it's all about money and power. And he dies, and he tells them we're all going to be standing before God soon. And within 1 month, Pope Clement is dead. Within 1 month. And later at that year, King Philip of France is dead in a hunting accident. And within 14 years, all of his heirs are dead. That's called God's judgment, okay? If you're writing the Old Testament, that's called God's judgment, okay? All of his heirs are dead. And I think it's all of natural causes, too. So they're all dead. And the war for succession, because you have the English Normans and stuff like that, and they're involved with France, they are going to fight 100 years war over succession. Over succession of who's in charge of France. And France and England are going to fight for 100 years over this, okay? Bankrupting the crap out of themselves, dwindling their population down. Meanwhile, 70 years of this 100 years war, you're going to have the papacy kidnapped to France. And then, within 20 years of this, the Black Plague is going to hit Europe. From what they did to the Templars, within 20 years, you're in the 100 Years' War. All of his descendants are dead, and almost immediately after they all die, the Black Plague comes. And the Black Plague comes from the Black Sea. That's why it's called the Black Plague. It comes from a port in the Black Sea. It basically came originally from Mongols, it looks like. Came from somewhere in China. And somehow it got onto ships from rats with termites on them. And then it got to, I forget, was an island on, I think it was an island in Sicily. And it gets into Italy. And it gets into Europe, and it gets into North Africa, and it kills somewhere, estimates range from 75 to 200 million people in Europe and North Africa. 30 estimates are 30 to 60% of Europe is killed. All within 20 years of this happening after the Crusades. You can't make this crap up, okay? Now, if I was sitting here as a historian, scholar, prophet, and a discerner of the times, I would be sitting here going, you know, I'm reading the Bible and the story of Israel, and y'all seem to want to be the new Israel, and you are effing up in every possible way they effed up, and you are having the judgments they had in every possible way. And you want to know how this all started? It's interesting, because Christendom started with Constantine painting a cross on his shield, supposedly, and winning a battle by using the cross as like a magic token. Well, interestingly enough, this all started with the Jews trying to take the Ark of the Covenant out to battle and use it like a magic token, and then they end up getting sacked and dominated by the 5 lords of the Philistines. And us, after Constantine, end up being dominated by the 5 pentarchs. And this is really kind of similar. But do you want to know how it ended? Rats with boils bringing a plague to the Philistines, and the gospel would not be released. the Ark of the Covenant, these rats and these boils would not stop until they got rid of the Ark of the Covenant and let it go. And it just so happens we haven't really evangelized anyone in 1,000 years. And the gospel is not really going anywhere. And we got a plague just like the plague that the Philistines got when they captured the ark. Now, I'm not the prophet or the son of a prophet. I'm just a random guy sitting around in England named John Wycliffe going, picking up on a pattern here. And John Wycliffe believes they're in the end times. John Wycliffe is going to write a book called The Last Age of the Church, okay? He's going to graduate from college about 3 years after the bubonic plague ends. And he's going to write a book called The Last Age of the Church. And he's like, we got a pope who is claiming to be the voice of God. He put this bill out after losing the Crusades. He puts out a bill called Unum Sanctum, which says he's in charge of the secular world and the spiritual world. He is God on earth, basically. Nobody can tell him he's wrong. Philip of France tried to push back against that, and his house is gone. The Avignon papacy is still going on. France is holding it. And ever since France took over the papacy, we've had nonstop war. The economy's horrible. Bajillions of people are dead from this plague. And the popes just keep getting richer. They keep getting richer and richer and richer. And there's nobility who are doing good, as long as they don't die from the plague. But the regular people are suffering all over Europe and England. And I think we're in the end times. And he's going to write this book called The Last Age of the Church. And he's going to declare that he's in the end times. And then he's going to have this audacious idea. I don't think we need bishops. I don't think we need priests. I think regular guys can learn the Bible and go spread the gospel. In fact, let's get a group of people together to get the gospel in English and teach regular people to go spread the gospel. And he's going to do that. And these people are going to be called the Lollards in England. And he is going to have nobility on his side. He's going to have parliament on his side. He's going to have the people on his side. He's even going to have much of the priesthood on his side, because he is speaking out against the annates, these massive payments you have to give to Rome to be a legitimate priest in their eyes. Okay? He's going to speak out against indulgences, these people buying the right to sin in advance, or buying the right to get less purgatory for themselves or their relatives in an imaginary hell that these guys have created, where you go temporarily to atone for your sins because Jesus apparently didn't atone for anybody's sins on the cross. And we're going to speak out against that. We're going to speak out against how rich and lavish all these bishops are, because your regular priests and your monks were poor. They were poor, celibate, they didn't have crap. But once you became a bishop or an archbishop, you were living large, son. You had an estate. You had a mansion. You were making it now. You were basically right up it was basically, that town was literally like the nobility. So whatever lord was in charge of that region, it was them and you. And you would treat with them. And furthest up they got was to the king, who was in charge of that whole realm. But the furthest up you got was to the Pope, which was in charge of the whole world. Think how powerful and rich you were. And these guys didn't need to have a wife. When you got money, you can have a concubine that nobody knows about, but if you got enough money. You can have a boy lover that nobody knows about if you got enough money. Because when you can when you have so much money coming in that you are pretty much the richest person in the realm, because after all, you're selling this and they're selling actual stuff. You can have whatever your lusts desire, and you have all the power. And that was the age that Wycliffe grew up in. And Wycliffe was a really good scholar, gets his doctorate. He starts working on a translation of the Bible. He's not doing it alone. He starts training Lollards to go all over England preaching the gospel. The gospel. Okay? And he's starting a revival in England. But then he comes up against transubstantiation. And these people are all still deeply superstitious. See, to tell them that I think the Pope might possibly be the Antichrist, and the proof is that we're losing all these wars and all this stuff, these people bought onto that because they were superstitious. But to come up against transubstantiation and the magic bread of immortality that you've been taking for literally by this time, 1,200 years, to come up against that, or infant baptism that everybody has practiced literally by this time for 900 years? Careful with that. You don't, listen, you can speak out against the American government, and you can speak out against the churches and everything that's going on, but don't you frickin' dare touch football. These people like their football. Don't you dare touch their guns. These people like their guns. Don't you dare touch tattoos, because these people like their tattoos. Don't you come up against the stuff that the people like. Okay? We like this crap. And he comes up against it. And people started backing off. Man, he was sounding like a awesome English nationalist who was saying we could make England great again by just having Christendom 2.0 in England and a grassroots Christian revival that can overthrow the popes. But whoa. Let's not go so far as to overthrow infant baptism or transubstantiation. That means our church doesn't have any power over the people. So we're not going to get on board with that. But they don't excommunicate him. They don't have him burned at the stake or anything like that. He's going to die of old age in, I think it's like, 1384, something like that. Maybe it's 1484. I think it's 1384 he's going to die. And not long after him, John Huss is going to pop up. Okay, so that was Wycliffe, and then John Huss is going to pop up. And John Huss is reading Wycliffe stuff, and he likes this brother. Remember, these guys, if you're educated, you're all speaking Latin. So the good thing is if you are highly educated, your ideas float through the clergy fast because they're in Latin. The Gutenberg printing press came out in 1440, and maybe it was in 1384. I think it was in 1384 that he does this. So the Gutenberg printing press is going to come out not long after this. Okay, but if you're writing stuff in Latin, it's going to float around among the clergy. They're going to get copies of it, and they're going to be like, "This guy makes sense. This guy makes sense." There's not a ton of educated people. And John Huss is going to read his stuff, and he's going to be like, "This guy makes sense. Indulgences are bullcrap. The clergy is corrupt." And he's going to try to make Czechoslovakia great again. And the problem with that is that he's going to speak out against the Pope. Now, at this time, after the Avignon papacy ends, the Pope, the last Pope from the Avignon papacy, is going to go back to Rome, and then he's going to die before he appoints a successor. And so you're going to have competing factions now. The papacy is finally free from the from France. And by this time, you have the Medici's banking clan starting to rise up, and you have different factions related to different powerful houses in Italy and Germany who all want a piece of this who's the next Pope thing, okay? Because the popes would literally do things like, you know what, we're going to do Fish Friday. Why? My relatives own the entire fishing industry, so we're going to do Fish Friday because Jesus did Fish Friday. Jesus didn't do Fish Friday. Jesus is warm-blooded, and in honor of Jesus as being warm-blooded, we're going to outlaw eating warm-blooded animals on Friday because that's when Jesus was crucified. Jesus wasn't crucified on Friday. Yes, he was, because the Didache says we don't fast like the hypocrites on the second and fourth day. We fast on the third and fifth day, which is Wednesday and Friday. So therefore, we're going to have Ash Wednesday, and we're going to have Good Friday now. And we're not going to eat fish on Friday because Jesus is warm-blooded, and we're not going to eat warm-blooded animals on Friday. So the only thing you can eat is snakes or fish. Take your pick. That's what I thought. You're going to eat fish. And my whole family owns the fishing industry. And turns out, when everybody now has to eat 1/7 of their meals as fish, and your family owns the fishing industry, you're going to do quite well for yourself. You have just expanded their market share greatly. And they're going to do crap like this, okay? The Medicis, that's why you have the Roman banking systems and stuff like this, is because after Philip murdered the Templars and kicked out the Jews, you had a vacuum in the need for usury and money lending and money storage and money transportation. And the Medici family is going to take over that business. And within 100 years, they're going to be putting popes in. It's all money and power, baby. And so John Huss, he's on to the game. And he starts calling this crap out. And he's saying, you know what? This indulgences crap sucks. You literally got people buying. Listen, imagine this. And this is where this is going, okay? So if you guys watch the movie or the show Upload, which is filthy, but watch it for understanding, okay? This is where they're going with this transhumanism and uploading your soul, okay? they're going to sell you afterlife insurance. And what that is going to do is that is going to get you not to give your inheritance to your kids, but to put it in an account where they can drain it forever and ever and ever until it's gone, to keep a digital avatar of you in a computer somewhere and convince your kids that that's really you, and convince you that that's really gonna be you, so that you sign over all your money to them before you die. That's where it's going. It's all about money, baby. The most of these people are going to sign up for this crap, not because they really believe in transhumanism, but because they believe in the almighty dollar. That's what they're going to do. And what were they selling you to back then? Afterlife insurance. That's what indulgences were. Afterlife insurance. You were buying tickets to have a better afterlife. Watch the show upload. This is where it's going. There is nothing new under the sun, okay? And these fools are selling literally, you know what? I want to go hit that over there, so I'm going to pay this indulgence fee so I can go hit that. That's fine. These folks are like, that's fine. Just, you got to do your Hail Marys, though, but I'll give you your ticket. All right. I'll do my Hail Marys. I'll do my Hail Marys. Her name is actually Mary. Mary, Queen of whatever, you know? So that's what they would do. They'd lie, cheat, steal, murder, rape, adulterate. By the time you get to Martin Luther's day, you literally have a guy running around. These are people quoting this, so if I'm wrong, it's because somebody lied to me, okay? These are people quoting this all over the place. This guy's running around that if you buy one of these indulgences, you can even rape the Virgin Mother herself, and God will forgive you. This is how awful this gets, okay? It's hand over fist. I mean, you think that's crazy, but then you look at Bethel. Buy this pillow and you'll have more prophetic dreams. Are people really that stupid? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. I think someone following my channel, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but didn't you say you knew the person who had Lonnie? So this woman following my channel, I forget, like, drop your name in the comment section. She knew the woman who had Lonnie Frisbee's easel. And these people are doing the same genuflecting bullcrap, and it's like Peter's big toe. Lonnie Frisbee's easel. The guy died of AIDS as a homosexual. Yeah, but we want his juju. Are you sure you want his juju, though? I'm not going to condemn the man to hell. Maybe he repented at the end. I don't know. But do you really want that juju? And yes, they do at Bethel want that juju. They want the juju. Okay? And John Huss is going to call this crap out. And he is going to get excommunicated because he is not popular with the scholars and nobility like John Wycliffe was. And they're going to excommunicate him, but they're not going to enforce it. Then he's going to call out the next pope, and these are the anti-popes who end up getting defrocked or deposed from the position after they have this council to distort. They have like 3 competing popes at this point. They literally have like 2 competing popes, and then they say, okay, we're just going to elect a 3rd pope, and neither one of you get to be pope, and then they all excommunicate each other, and you have people fighting over which of these 3 people is the pope, because it's all tied to money and power and family and influence, okay? And they have to have a council to do this, and while they're at this council, they're going to say, let's come up with a common enemy so we can all agree on persecuting someone, because we like a good burning at the stake, and why have a council without somebody being condemned, right? And so none of us popes will get condemned, but we're going to pick one pope here, and let's condemn this John Wycliffe guy, because you can't have a council without someone being condemned. And now, because we follow Augustinian violence doctrine, we're going to burn him at the stake. How's that sound? And everyone's just like, you know what? I don't like the fact that I don't get to be the pope anymore, but this guy who is calling me out, being burned at the stake, makes me feel a lot better about it. Kid you not. This is what went down. He's going to call out the pope who gets deposed. The pope who gets deposed, this is part of the negotiation. You know that guy who's been talking crap about you? Yeah, we're going to burn him alive. How does that sound? Deal. Sign me up. We'll give you some munties. We'll call it good. You'll get a good archbishop seat. Don't worry about it. Deal. But I want to see that mofo burn. All right. So John Huss is promised safe passage to come to their council and explain his views. And on the way there, he gets arrested, called out to recant. When he doesn't, they burn him alive. And supposedly, he's going to prophesy. I don't know if this is true or not because the reformers are full of propaganda. But supposedly he's going to prophesy that, you know what? A century from now, he's like, my goose is cooked. That's where my goose is cooked apparently come from. You're going to cook this goose, he says, but in a century now, another goose is going to squawk and you're not going to be able to silence him. And I don't know if he was saying that generally or prophesying or just didn't say it all because reformers are propagandists and make crap up as bad as the Catholics do. But he supposedly prophesied Martin Luther's coming. And he's going to die about 100 years before Martin Luther is going to do his 95 Theses. So, and what is it going to be over? It's not going to be over justification and faith. It's going to be over indulgences, which is the same thing that everybody... Listen, this is not about the rise of the true gospel. This is about the rise of anti-Catholic sentiment and nationalism, which is going to free the gospel to be found again, because people are going to print the scriptures in their own languages. Okay? So as a byproduct from all these guys' shenanigans, and I'm saying Wycliffe was pretty legit, Huss was pretty legit. I'm even going to get Luther. He was pretty legit, okay? But they were all still trapped in a lot of bad doctrines from their own day. None of them were really free from state church. I would say the closest to it was going to be John Wycliffe, but he was still a nationalist. And he was still playing to the nationalist sentiments of the English against the French-dominated papacy. And Luther's going to do the same thing. He's going to play to the German nationalist interests against the now Italian-dominated papacy. And John Huss was playing to the Czechoslovakian nationalist interests against the French and Italian-dominated papacy. Because what you didn't have is any Slavic popes. You never had. The first Slavic pope is going to be Pope John Paul II from Poland. That's the first Slavic pope you ever had. These other Czechoslovakia, all these Eastern European states, I think it's mostly Czechoslovakia and Austria. I think Czechoslovakia is and Poland, I think, are the only Slavic Catholics. I think the rest of the Slavs are Orthodox. I could be mistaken. And that's going to happen. Okay, so now we're in the early 1400s. Okay. And the last thing, how we're going to close out this era, and this is how I close out my chapter, is the fall of Constantinople, okay? Now, I used to, when I looked at the parallel between Israel and the church, I used to look at, because the Byzantine Empire mostly got gobbled up first as being northern Israel, and the Papal states and Papal Holy Roman Empire as southern Israel. I don't look at it that way anymore. I look at it in reverse, okay? The reason is because when you have the pattern, you have when the Assyrians take over northern Israel, they are going to take over everything but the land right around Jerusalem, okay? Jerusalem itself is going to be free, and the immediate surroundings are going to be free because that whole deal with the angel killing all of his armies under Hezekiah. But everything else is going to be conquered. Well, it's going to be the same thing with Byzantium. Everything is going to be swallowed up in the whole Roman Empire. Okay, if you look at Roman Christendom like the Kingdom of Israel, because it really is. Give us a king, give us an emperor. It's the same thing. Okay, and if you look at Christendom like the state of Israel, you look at it and you go, huh. The West is overrun by the Germanic peoples, and the East is overrun by the Islamic peoples. So the barbarians take over. Yes, the pagans take over. They are pagans. Okay? And what happens in Assyria is you have the pagans who come into Samaria, they get attacked by lions. And so, therefore, they're going to start practicing, because they're superstitious, they're going to start practicing Judaism to make the lions stop. Okay, and God legitimately sends the lions, and that's where their Samaritans are going to come from. But they're going to all keep their idols back at home. What does that sound like? Does that sound like Western Roman Catholicism and Germanic Christianity? And the answer is yes. They're keeping their pagan idols in secret, but they're practicing Catholicism on the surface, which is idolatrous, and that's where all the mixing of idols is going to come in. Okay, so that is going to the Roman Catholics are more like the Samaritans, Constantinople is more like Jerusalem, where everything gets taken but the capital. Okay, and then at the fall of Constantinople, I look at as like the fall of Jerusalem. Okay, and so you have Constantinople, which is basically getting besieged by Ottoman Turks now. So the Ottoman Turks are going to basically, after the Crusades die down, and then you're going to have the Russians basically become the Crusades are going to end in the end of the 13th century. The Ottoman Empire is going to begin immediately after that. Okay, what's going to happen is the Mongols are going to come through, and they're going to knock out the Mamluks, so Saladin's people who are ruling caliphate, and the Mongols are going to sack Persia. They're going to sack Baghdad. They're going to pile up skulls miles high. They're just killing everywhere, and nobody has the power to stop them except for the Russians. And the reason the Russians stop them, the Russians are brilliant, okay? The Russian Muscovites are going to sit here on the edge of the Golden Horde's army. And the Golden Horde is basically the main horde between Mongolia and Poland, okay? And that's the main horde that is running Siberia. And so if you need to evacuate, you evacuate to them. If you need to gather more troops, you gather more troops from them. And so that's the main strong one. Well, the Russians are going to marry in with the Khans. And so what you end up having is, that's why Russian people are Mongoloid. People don't realize, like, oh, did you know the Muscovites were married into the Mongols? That's why they're Gog Magog, okay? That's why Russia is Magog, because literally the Muscovites, Meshech, the Kievan Rus, Meshech mixed peoples, their lords, the czars of Russia, were married into the Mongols. And because they were married into the Mongols, what they're going to do is there's going to be these kingdoms called Novgorod, okay? These are not just awesome names from Lord of the Rings video games and stuff like that. These are actual places in Russia, okay? And there was a kingdom of Novgorod. And basically, Russia is going to be between them, and they're going to be between them and other Polands, because you're going to have the kingdom in Lithuania, you're going to have other Slavic kingdoms. And because the Muscovites are married into the Mongols, they're going to say, why don't you let us collect tribute for you? Okay? And then they're going to say, we're going to collect the tribute for you, and we're going to deliver it to you, and they're going to consistently do this for about a century. Okay? And meanwhile, they're married in with them, so they kind of trust them. And then they're going to consolidate their political power against all the other Slavs. But then at the same time, they're going to be using the money from sacking and pillaging and all this stuff to build Orthodox churches. Because by this time, Byzantium is getting weaker and weaker. And the way they're building their loyalty back with these Slavic groups that they're conquering is by saying, you know what, we are preserving Slavic culture and Orthodox Christianity, which is all over Slavic culture now, against the Mongols, while being tributaries for the Mongols. And of course, within about 75 to 100 years, they're going to start rebelling against the Mongols, and they're going to start winning battles against them, and they're going to push the Mongols all the way back to Siberia, all the way back to Mongolia, in the north. The Mongol Khanates, you're going to hear the name Khan all over Persia and India and stuff like that, because the Mongol Khanates in the south are going to get overrun eventually by Turkish peoples. And so you're going to have two groups of Turks that are going to come up. You're going to have the Timurid Turks, and the Timurids are going to basically take over the old Parthian Empire. And then you're going to have the Ottoman Turks take over the old Byzantine Empire. And they're going to keep growing and growing and growing. Let's see what we got here. The Ottomans are going to start around literally like within a few years of the end of the Crusades. Okay, remember that the Crusades blocked off the Seljuk Turks from right here, and basically the Ottomans are going to come out of the Seljuks. This is going to be one house, this guy named Osman, and that's where Ottoman comes from. And they're going to take over this, and because the Byzantine Empire was never weak without the Crusader states helping them out, or it was never strong without that, they're going to basically take over everything that the Byzantines controlled, which is right here. Okay, So they're going to overrun all these weak peoples that the Byzantines controlled. The 100 Years' War is going on over here. So the main powers over here are occupied with this. The Holy Roman Empire is occupied with this. But they're competing over the popes, and there's going to be occasional wars going on between the Germans and the French because they're now distinct languages. These guys are more Latin, and these guys are old school German. And then England's going to be a third party, and those three parties are going to be rivaling for power here. Spain and Portugal are emerging as a kingdom here. Notice we're close to 1492, and Columbus is about to sail the ocean blue, right? Well, the Ottomans in 1452 are going to basically sack Constantinople. And Constantinople is going to plead for help, and these guys are going to all be screwed. And here's why. Not only has the 100 Years' War been going on, not only has the bubonic plague wiped them all out, but after they burned John Huss at the stake over indulgences, the popes needed to create a diversion against this. And it just so happens that the Byzantines are because remember the popes are for sale, and they're awful, and the whole world is starting to turn against them. Okay, and they've been systematically turning against them since the Crusades, but now you've had the 100 Years of War and the bubonic plague, and people are pretty anti-pope. And so what do the popes do to throw everybody off the scent? Let's have another crusade. And so they marshal all of Christendom to go fight the Ottomans and deliver Constantinople. And you know what happens? They have a battle in Nicopolis, which I think is in Turkey or Greece, and this massive army of 140,000 is defeated in 3 days. Gone. They get crushed. And that's when people are like, you know what? Mind you, where are we here? We're 75 years shy of Martin Luther's 95 Thesis. So don't you dare think this is all about theology. It's about politics, money, and power. Okay? 75 years shy of this, all of the armies of Christendom are get their butts handed to them by the Ottomans. And the Ottomans go on and sack Constantinople, rape and pillage, take 60,000 Christians captive. All the scholars are going to be shipped out with the Venetian merchants, and they're going to leave to Venice, and they're going to start the Renaissance, which is going to get people thinking and questioning stuff again. That's what's going to happen. And they're going to influence Erasmus up here. They're going to influence somewhat Martin Luther. He's going to be very big into Greek philosophy because of these Venetian, these are people from Constantinople that were kicked out. And they kept the Greek stuff. They kept speaking Greek, and they had all these Greek writings and stuff like this, okay? It didn't come from the Arabs. I used to think it came back from the Arabs. It did not. The Venetians did have access to Arabs, so they probably had some writings and stuff from them, but it mostly came from the sack of Constantinople. Okay? And the popes are not looking good at this time, so what are they going to do to throw them off the scent again? They're going to say, hey, Portugal and Spain, why don't you go take over the world for Jesus and bring back all that gold, and we'll make you Holy Roman Emperors over everything. And they're going to manipulate things until the Spanish, you're going to literally have the Spanish are going to go conquer and rape and pillage and all this stuff among the Aztecs and take all that gold and come back. And you're going to have basically one kingdom that is controlling Spain and all of this. You're going to have France, and you're going to have Portugal. Portugal is colonizing Brazil. They're colonizing Canada. They're colonizing all throughout Africa and the Middle East and Southeast Asia and stuff like this, while the Spanish are colonizing all of Latin America. I mean, from Florida down to Argentina, the Spanish are colonizing it. And they're taking all that gold. They're raping and pillaging the Incas and the Aztecs. They're going straight for the hearts of the biggest empires because they have gunpowder now. They have gunpowder, and they have steel, and they also have, read the book, Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel, okay? They show up. These guys are, their immune systems are peak. They have been through the bubonic plague. These are the survivors of this, okay? This is 100 years after the bubonic plague, and these guys are mint. And they go there with top-grade steel, and they go there with top-grade armor, and they go there with gunpowder and cannons and guns and stuff, and they show up, and it's just a bloodbath. They're like, we're going to go straight for the heart of these kingdoms across the sea. They always knew they were there. They always knew they were there. The Vikings had been there for years. They had been following the Atlantic cod back and forth and fishing, and they've known this for years. The English knew it. They always knew about the land over the sea. The Greeks went there. The Muslims went there. The Africans went there. The Chinese went there. They knew about it. Nobody discovered anything. And they knew this gunpowder is probably not over there. And we've been fighting nonstop. Go sack that crap. Bring back all that Munties, and you can rule this and this. And because they had all that money, that's how they were able to, the Holy Roman Empire got so strong in Martin Luther's day. And that's how you get all these German princes who are going to get so strong that they're going to basically say, we need to make Germany great again, biatch, to King Charles V, I think he is. He's like, we need to make Germany great again. We're sick of this Italian crap. We're sick of this papal crap. We're sick of this indulgence stuff and all this crap. We need to formulate some new doctrines. Can we still worship Mary? Yes, we can still worship Mary. Can we still baptize our babies? Yes, we can still baptize our babies. Can we still believe that Jesus isn't a magic cookie and we get immortality by eating it? Yes. Do we still force everybody to be Christians? Of course we do. But let's get rid of this Pope. We got a guy, Martin Luther. We're going to make it out to be like this guy is just the bee's knees of sainthood. What about the Jews? He hates Jews. Don't worry about that. So we won't have any competitive banks, is what you're saying. Yes. And we're going to stir this dude up. And we're going to promote his crap. Because he's speaking out against indulgences, and we like this. And so we're gonna run this guy. You know, just like they made Billy Graham famous. Why? Because he was unifying all the Christian sects and having big crusades. We're going to make this Billy Graham guy something. We're going to make this Martin Luther guy something, okay? Anyone who comes against Martin Luther, we're going to take care of him. Trust me, King Charles, we're going to make Germany great again. You still have Spain, and we're still subservient to you. You're still rich, you're still powerful, but we're going to make Germany great again over here. You good with that? Yeah, I guess I'm good with that. Okay. You still have Holland. Nope, Holland's going to break away immediately. You still have Switzerland. Nope, they're going to break away. Everyone's going to just start rebelling against the Holy Roman Empire until it's basically just Spain. And you just have Germany rise up and Czechoslovakia rise up. They're going to be Calvinists. The Swiss are going to become Calvinists. The French Huguenots over here, they're going to become Calvinists. France is not going to like that. It's going to go back to the Papal Frankish alliance, and you're going to have the Spanish, who basically have taken over all of Latin America based on the popes making them gods. And then they're going to have the French, who were made false Roman emperors by the popes, and those two are going to stay allied to the Italians, and they're going to trade back and forth, being frenemies with Russia, the Ottomans, and the Germans. Back and forth until World War I and World War II, and then finally it settles down. Christians killing Christians, siding with Muslims against Christians, Orthodox against Catholics, Catholics against Orthodox. They're going to use nationalism now, God and country. Have Christians killing Christians on Christmas Day. And the Christians are all going to stop from killing each other. And they're going to be like, hey, you guys want to celebrate Christmas together? Yes, we have to go kill each other tomorrow because our fearless leaders, who turn out to all be cousins, are telling us to kill each other. Okay, we'll mustard gas you tomorrow, but Merry Christmas today. Merry Christmas, Germany. We're all related. Literally, the leaders of Russia, England, and Germany look identical because they're all cousins. They literally hold up pictures of them. They look identical because they're all cousins. But we're going to fight each other to the death by the millions for their glory. Because Jesus. Reasons. God wills it. This is Christendom. This is how Christendom dies. Okay? Christendom dies at World War I. And in World War II, Nazi Germany picks up Martin Luther's book and says, man, this guy did make Jerusalem great again. What we need is a common foe. And it turns out he hates the Jews. It turns out the Jews are everywhere. And if we turn everyone on the Jews, and we're all Christians, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we can really make Germany great again, and we can bring back the Roman Empire. And then Nazi Germany is going to happen. We've never stopped with this. Because the Russians claim to be the Tsars, and they're really Mongols mixed with Muscovites, Meshech, and Rosh, which is why they're going to be in the Gog-Magog invasion. The Germans and French are barbarians, but they're claiming to be the Roman empires, and that's why the French had the Holy Roman Empire title, and that's why the Germans call themselves Kaisers. And then the Ottoman Turks sacked Constantinople, so they started calling themselves Kaisers. So you literally have 3 or 4 competing groups claiming to be the Roman Caesar, while this guy now is claiming to be the Vicar of Christ. I am the new Aaronic priesthood. You guys can all fight over who gets to be the next David, but I promise you, these whores, when that guy is the Antichrist, these whores are some new unified whore that they come up with and support is going to be the kingmaker of that guy. And that's going to be the Antichrist and false prophet. Because it's just one big whore festival. So that's a lot of history, but I just walked you guys through like 1,000 years in a few hours, and I put it in my book in about 30 pages. Anyways, I'm going to put up probably a post that says, what do you guys want me to discuss next? And I hope you guys are blessed by this. I hope you enjoy your Sabado and do something fruitful for the kingdom of God. Remember, don't get involved in politics. It's all harlotry. We don't want politics. We don't want Monty. We want the kingdom. We want to share Jesus Christ and Him crucified with somebody that they'll believe that their sins were forgiven, and they should be thankful and joyful because of that, and spread the good news. All right? Be blessed. Batman out. Peace.